Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. The radio crackled to life at exactly midnight. I remember, because I was staring at my watch, trying to stay awake during another lonely night shift. Through the static, I heard something that made my blood run cold. My own voice, speaking. Words I hadn't said yet, but I should start from the beginning. My name is Howard Mitchell, and I took this job at the radio monitoring station because I thought it would be peaceful. After what I saw in Korea during the war, peace was all I wanted. Just me, my radio equipment, and the endless South Dakota sky. Boy, was I wrong. It all started 3 months ago when I first drove up that winding dirt road to the station. The Badlands spread out below like a giant had taken bites out of the earth, leaving behind towers and valleys of striped rock. The monitoring station sat right on top of the highest plateau, a plain concrete building with a bunch of antennas sticking out of it like metal trees. Dr. Raymond Mercer, my new boss, met me at the door. He was a tall man with thick glasses and a fake smile. "Welcome to your new home, Mr. Mitchell," he said, leading me inside. "We're studying weather patterns here, nothing more, nothing less." Something about the way he said it made me think he wasn't telling the whole truth. The inside of the station was simple enough. A small bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and the main control room filled with radio equipment. I felt right at home with the dials and switches. After all, I'd spent 3 years in the army working with much more complicated stuff. The previous operator left rather suddenly, Dr. Mercer mentioned, almost as an afterthought. "His personal items are still in the quarters. You can pack them up when you have time." That should have been my first warning sign. Who leaves a job so quickly they don't even take their stuff? But I was too busy checking the equipment to really think about it. My only regular visitor was Benjamin Redfeather, the supply delivery driver who came once a month. He was a local Native American man with deep wrinkles around his eyes and a serious face. The first time he came, he helped me unload the boxes of food and spare parts, then grabbed my arm before leaving. "Listen carefully to the radio," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But remember, not all voices are really voices." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, his truck disappearing into the dusty horizon. I settled into a routine. Pretty quickly. Wake up, check the equipment, maintain the generators, monitor the radio signals, and take walks around the station's perimeter. The walks were my favorite part. The Badlands changed colors throughout the day, purple at dawn, golden in the afternoon, blood red at sunset. It was beautiful, but so empty it made your ears ring. Then, the strange things started happening. It began with the midnight signals. They would come through clear as day, but when I checked the recordings the next morning, there was nothing but static. I double-checked every piece of equipment, but found nothing wrong. Well, almost nothing. Some of the machines had weird modifications I'd never seen before, things that didn't match any of the official station diagrams. The power meters started acting up next. Every night, between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the station's power usage would spike through the roof, but nothing seemed to be running any harder than usual. It was like the electricity was just disappearing. Then I noticed the rocks. Maybe I was going crazy from being alone too long, but I swear some of the formations around the station moved when I wasn't looking. I'd walk my usual route and find boulders in places they hadn't been the day before. No tracks, no sign of movement. They just changed. But the worst part, the thing that really started to get to me, was when I heard Tommy's voice through the radio static. Tommy, my best friend from the war, who I'd watched die in my arms in Korea. His voice came through, clear as day. "Hey, Howie, remember that promise you made me?" I ran to the bathroom and threw up. because I did remember that promise, and I'd never told anyone about it, never wrote it down, never even said it out loud since that day. When I got back to the control room, the signal was gone. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew that whatever this station was really built to monitor, it wasn't the weather. In the previous operator's quarters, I found a box of old newspapers, local stories about people who had gone missing in the Badlands, dozens of them going back decades. And in the margin of one article, scribbled in shaky handwriting, "It's in the rocks, it's always been in the rocks." That's when I found the bunker entrance. Hidden behind some equipment in the basement, a heavy metal door with a security keypad. The kind of door you use when you're trying to keep something in, not out. I wasn't supposed to find that door, and I definitely wasn't supposed to have the clearance code written on a sticky note in the previous operator's desk drawer, but I did. That's how my real story began. The story of what's really hiding in the Badlands and why this station is really here. And believe me, you're going to want to hear what I found behind that door. I stood in front of that bunker door for a long time before I worked up the courage to type in the code. My hands were shaking so bad I had to try twice. When the door finally clicked open, the sound echoed through the empty basement like a gunshot, but I didn't go in, not yet. Something told me that once I crossed that threshold, there'd be no going back to my simple life of monitoring weather patterns. Instead, I went back upstairs and tried to pretend everything was normal. That's when the voices in Lakota started. Coming through the radio, I know it was Lakota because my unit in Korea had a guy from Pine Ridge Reservation who used to speak it. The voices were quiet at first, like whispers behind the regular static. But they got louder each night, and even though I couldn't understand the words, the tone made my skin crawl. They sounded scared. I started having dreams too, the same one, night after night. In it, I'd be walking through the Badlands under a blood-red moon. There was always this one rock formation, shaped kind of like a hand reaching up from the ground. In the dream, it would call to me. Not with words exactly, but I knew it wanted me to come closer. Every night in the dream, I'd get a little closer to it. And every morning I'd wake up in a cold sweat. The thing is, I recognized that rock formation. It was about a half-mile from the station, but I'd never paid it much attention before the dreams started. Benjamin was supposed to come with supplies on the 15th, but he never showed. My food was running low, and the radio calls to headquarters just got static in response. I started rationing what I had left, making meal plans like we did in the army when supplies ran short. That's when I found the journal. I was looking through the previous operator's stuff, hoping to find some emergency food he might have stashed away. Instead, I found a beaten-up notebook stuffed between the mattress and the wall. The first entries were normal enough, daily logs, equipment readings, weather notes, but then they changed. Day 45. The voices are getting louder. They know things they shouldn't know. Day 52. Something is wrong with the rocks. They move when I sleep. I've started taking pictures to prove it. Day 60. It's not the station that's monitoring something. Something is monitoring us. The last entry was just one line, written in shaky letters that trailed off the page. It's offering me a trade. While I was reading the journal, the lights started flickering. At first, I thought it was just another power surge, but then I felt it, a deep rumbling coming up through the floor, like something huge was moving underground. I ran to check the monitoring equipment. The needles on every dial were swinging wildly, and a red warning light I'd never seen before was flashing on one of the modified panels. That's when I noticed the maintenance panel had come loose from the wall. Behind it, stuffed into the hollow space, I found them. Dozens of little bundles of sage, tied with red string and wrapped in what looked like old leather. Some of them had symbols drawn on them that made my eyes hurt if I looked at them too long. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the geological survey maps I'd found in the filing cabinet. I spread them out on the desk, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. That's when I saw it. The station wasn't just built on this plateau by chance. According to the maps, there was something underneath us. A whole network of caves that didn't show up on any official maps. The rumbling got stronger, and I swear I could hear something that sounded like laughter coming from deep below the station. Not human laughter, something else. I looked at the bunker door code in my hand, then at the journal, then at the strange bundles in the wall. I knew I had two choices. I could pack up my things, start walking until I found help, and try to forget everything I'd seen. Or I could go down those stairs and find out what this place was really built to monitor. The bunker door was still waiting, and now I could hear something behind it calling my name. I wish I could say I was brave when I finally went down those bunker stairs. But the truth is, I was terrified. My flashlight beam bounced off the concrete walls, and each step down echoed like a drumbeat. The air got colder as I descended, and it had a strange smell, like wet earth and something else I couldn't quite place. That's when the storm hit. The thunder was so loud, it shook dust from the ceiling. Through the small window at the top of the stairs, I could see lightning turning the night sky purple. My radio crackled to life in my jacket pocket. I always kept a portable one with me, old army habit. But what came through wasn't weather reports or static. It was my voice again. Only this time it was speaking from what seemed like days in the future. If you're hearing this, Howard, turn back now. The thing down there, they call it the skin thief. It's trapped under the station, but it's getting stronger. Whatever. You do, don't. The transmission cut off in a burst of static. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped the radio. The skin thief. Even the name made my skin crawl. At the bottom of the stairs, I found something that didn't belong in a weather station. A large circular room with weird markings carved into the walls. It looked ancient, but right in the middle was modern equipment, computers, monitors, and something that looked like a metal cage built into the floor. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Inside, I found folders marked "Classified" in red ink. As I read through them, my mouth got drier and drier. This station wasn't built to monitor weather. It was built to monitor something trapped in the rocks below, something that had been here long before the station existed. I was so absorbed in reading that I almost missed the footsteps. They were coming from upstairs, slow, dragging steps. That didn't sound quite right. I quickly turned off my flashlight and held my breath. The steps got closer to the bunker door. "Howard," a voice called down. It was Dr. Mercer. "Are you down there? We've got a situation upstairs." But that was impossible. Dr. Mercer had left the station weeks ago. I'd watched him drive away myself. "Howard, please come up. I need your help with something." The voice sounded like Dr. Mercer, but something was wrong with it, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I stayed absolutely still on dark. The footsteps got closer to the stairs. In the beam of light from the window above, I saw a shadow that wasn't shaped quite right. It moved like someone wearing a suit that didn't fit properly. I pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The thing that wasn't Dr. Mercer reached the bottom of the stairs. In the dim light, I could see its face, almost perfect, but not quite. Like a mask that was slightly too loose. It turned its head, and I swear its neck bent at an angle that no human neck could manage. "I know you're here, Howard," it said, but now the voice was different, older, deeper, with an accent I'd never heard before. "We need to talk about making a trade." My elbow bumped one of the filing cabinets, making a tiny sound. The thing's head snapped toward me so fast it should have broken its neck. Its eyes caught the light, like an animal's. I ran. There was a door on the other side of the room. Not the stairs I'd come down, but a heavy metal door marked maintenance access. I didn't think. I just moved. Behind me, I heard something that started as Dr. Mercer's laugh, but turned into something else halfway through. The door was locked, but I still had the keycard I'd found in the previous operator's desk. I swiped it and threw myself through the doorway. The door shut behind me with a heavy clang. I found myself in a narrow tunnel carved right into the rock. Emergency lights cast everything in a sickly red glow. On the walls were more of those strange symbols I'd seen upstairs, but down, here they were everywhere, carved deep into the stone. Some of them seemed to move in the corner of my eye. As I caught my breath, I realized three things. First, the thing upstairs wearing Dr. Mercer's face wasn't alone. I could hear movement in other tunnels around me. Second, I'd seen a map of these tunnels in the classified files. They formed a circle under the station, with something big in the center. And third, the real Dr. Mercer had never left the station at all. I knew because I'd just seen his actual body, hidden behind some pipes in the tunnel ahead, looking like it had been empty for weeks. Whatever was wearing his face upstairs wasn't just copying how he looked. It had taken everything he was, and now it wanted to make a trade with me. I knew I couldn't stay in that tunnel forever. The emergency lights buzzed overhead, and the air was getting thinner the deeper I went. I had to find a way back up, but first I needed to understand what I was dealing with. My hands shook as I opened the classified file I'd grabbed before running. The pages were old and yellow, dated back to 1891. The first page had a photo that made my stomach turn. It showed something that looked almost human, but wrong, like a child's drawing come to life. Below it was a single word, Skinwalker. As I read more, the pieces started falling into place. The station hadn't been built to study weather. It was built on top of an ancient Native American ritual site. The government had found something here, something that could change its shape to look like anyone it wanted. But it didn't just copy how people looked. It took everything they were, their memories, their voices, even the way they thought. A scratching sound from somewhere in the tunnels made me jump. I switched off my flashlight and listened. The scratching got closer, then stopped. Something was hunting me. I flipped through the file faster now. The station's equipment wasn't for weather monitoring. It was designed to keep this thing trapped underground. The radio towers, the power surges, even the strange bundles I'd found in the walls. They were all part of a system combining modern technology with ancient tribal magic. Then I found the page about the previous operators. My blood ran cold. As I read it, none of them had ever really left. The thing down here had taken them one by one, using their faces and voices to lure the next operator down. And now it was trying to do the same to me. The scratching started again, closer this time. I heard something that sounded like breathing, but not quite right. Like someone trying to remember how breathing should sound. I turned to the last page of the file. It showed a diagram of the station and the cave system beneath it. In the center was a large chamber marked Primary Containment. That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. The tunnels weren't just random. They formed a pattern, like a giant spider web, and I was getting closer to the center. A voice called out in the darkness. This time it was Benjamin, the delivery driver. "Howard, I brought your supplies. Where are you?" But I knew it wasn't really Benjamin. The real Benjamin had tried to warn me about the voices that weren't really voices. Now I understood what he meant. The voice got closer. "Howard, you must be hungry by now. Let's talk about that trade I mentioned." I pressed myself against the wall, trying not to breathe. The footsteps were almost next to me now. Then I saw it in the red emergency lights. Something that looked like Benjamin, but moved all wrong. Its joints bent in ways they shouldn't, and its skin seemed to shift and ripple like water. "I can give you what you want, Howard," it said, its voice changing to sound like Tommy from the war. "Remember what you wished for that day in Korea? I can make it come true." My hand touched something on the wall. Another one of those strange symbols, but this one was different. It was warm to the touch, and as soon as I felt it, the thing wearing Benjamin's face stopped moving. It let out a hiss that no human throat could make. I ran again, deeper into the tunnels. Behind me, I heard more voices calling out. My parents, old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. But now I knew the truth. The real question wasn't what this thing was anymore. The question was, why did it want me down here so badly? I found the answer in the central chamber. The walls were covered in monitors and strange equipment, all of it connected to a large metal circle in the floor. And in the middle of that circle was something that looked like black smoke trying to become solid. As I watched, the smoke started to take shape. It was trying to look like me. The thing in the circle was learning me like someone learning a new language. Every few seconds, its smoky shape would become more like me. My face, my hands, the way I stood. It was practicing being Howard Mitchell. Didn't run this time. Something told me I'd reached the place where running wouldn't help anymore. Instead, I started looking around the room, trying to understand what all this equipment was for. My radio training from the army helped me recognize some of it. Frequency generators, signal amplifiers, power modulators. But they were set, up in ways I'd never seen before. That's when my radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't playing tricks with voices. It was picking up old transmissions from the previous operators, like echoes trapped in time. Day 87. It shows you what you want most. Don't listen. Day 92. The containment field runs on specific frequencies. If you can find the right one. Day 95. It can't copy electronic records. That's why we have to keep everything on tape. The smoke thing was almost finished now. It had my face, my clothes, even the small scar on my left hand from Korea. But its eyes were wrong, deep and dark like wells going down forever. Let's talk about that trade now, Howard, it said with my voice. I know what you want. You want Tommy back. You want to change what happened that day. I can do that for you. It was right. That's what I'd wanted every day since Korea, to go back and save Tommy, to keep that promise I made to him as he was dying. The thing knew this because it had been listening to my thoughts through the radio all this time. But then I remembered something from the classified files. The entity feeds on desire and regret. Perfect mimicry requires consuming the original. That's when I understood. It didn't just want to look like me, it wanted to become me, to add me to its collection of stolen faces and memories, and it would use my deepest wish to make me agree. Looked at the equipment again, really looked at it this time. The way it was arranged, it wasn't just containing the creature. It was using the radio towers above to broadcast a signal that kept it weak. That's why it needed the trades. It couldn't break out on its own. Think about it, Howard, my double said softly. One small trade, just a little freedom for me, and Tommy lives. For a moment, I almost said yes. The thought of seeing Tommy, again of keeping my promise, but then I noticed something on one of the monitors. It showed the radio frequency the containment field was using, 121.5 MHz, the emergency broadcast frequency. I had an idea, a crazy one, but it was all I had. I'd been a radio operator long enough to know that frequencies could be amplified, redirected, and this thing, whatever it really was, existed partly as a radio signal. That's how it got into our heads, played with the equipment. Okay, I said, let's make a trade. The thing wearing my face smiled, not quite right, like it was still learning how smiles worked. I knew you'd understand, Howard. Just help me get past the containment field. Think about Tommy. No, I said, moving toward the control panel. I've got a different trade in mind. Its smile disappeared. What are you doing? My hand found the frequency dial. You wanted to know about that promise I made to Tommy? Here it is. I promised him I'd never let anyone else die the way he did, trapped and afraid. I spun the dial all the way up and grabbed the microphone. So here's the trade. You can have my voice, but I'm going to use it to make sure you never trap anyone else down here again. The thing wearing my face realized what I was doing a second too late. I grabbed the microphone and started broadcasting on the emergency frequency, amplifying it through all the station's towers at once. "My name is Howard Mitchell," I said into the mic, my voice echoing through the chamber. "I'm recording this message for whoever comes next. The thing down here in the caves, it's not just trapped, it's afraid. And now I know why." The creature lunged at me, but hit some kind of invisible wall. The containment field was still working, and I had just made it stronger by boosting the signal. You see, it's not as powerful as it wants us to think. It needs us, needs our memories, our regrets, our wishes. Without them, it's just smoke and static. The thing that looked like me started to change. Its edges got blurry, like a radio signal. Breaking up, it tried to switch faces, Tommy, Dr. Mercer, Benjamin, but couldn't hold any of them. "Stop," it said. But now its voice was different. Old. Tired. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand plenty," I said, both into the mic and to the creature. "You've been down here so long, taking pieces of everyone who came before, their faces, their memories, their lives. But that's the problem. You've taken too many. You're like a radio trying to play 100 stations at once." I turned up the power on the broadcast. The equipment hummed so loud I could feel it in my teeth. The creature's shape was breaking apart now, spreading out like ink in water. "Howard," it said, and this time it sounded like Tommy again. "Please, that promise you made." "I'm keeping that promise right now," I said. "Nobody else is going to die down here. Not for you, not ever again." I pushed the broadcast power to maximum. All those radio towers up above, the ones I thought were for monitoring weather, they were actually making a cage. And I had just turned that cage into a prison cell. The creature let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream. Its shape exploded into black smoke, swirling around the chamber like a tornado. Faces appeared in the smoke, hundreds of them. Everyone it had ever taken, all trying to break free at once. Then something strange happened. The symbols on the walls, the ones the local tribes had carved centuries ago, started to glow. Not with light exactly, but with something else. The smoke was being pulled into them, like water down a drain. "You can't do this," the creature said, its voice now a mixture of everyone it had ever been. "I've been here since before your kind had names. I'll be here long after." I hit the final switch, connecting all the equipment at once. The chamber filled with a high-pitched whine that made my head feel like it was splitting open. The smoke spiraled faster and faster, getting sucked into the walls. Then everything went quiet. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The monitors showed the containment field was stronger than ever. The thing in the caves wasn't gone. Something that old probably couldn't be destroyed. But it was trapped deeper than before, wrapped in layers of technology and ancient magic. I found a blank tape in the control room and recorded everything that had happened. Then I added one last message. "To whoever hears this, my name is Howard Mitchell. I was the radio operator at Badlands Station. If you're hearing this, it means you're the next operator. You might hear strange voices on the radio. You might see things that can't be real. Just remember, it's trapped down here for a reason. And now, thanks to this broadcast being played on a loop through all the towers, it's going to stay that way. I'm not leaving the station. Can't risk it getting loose again. So I'll be here, manning the radio, keeping the signal strong. And if something ever goes wrong, if it ever starts to break free again, well, now you know what to do. This is Howard Mitchell signing off. Remember, not all voices are really voices. And some promises are worth keeping, no matter what they cost. I set the tape to play on repeat through the station's speakers. Even now, years later, you can still hear it broadcasting if you drive through the Badlands late at night. Just a voice on the radio keeping an ancient promise, and somewhere deep below, in the darkness under the rocks, something that wears 1,000 faces listens and waits. The last time I saw my husband Robert alive, he kissed me goodbye and promised to be home for dinner. That was 6 months ago. They found his body crushed under tons of rock in the coal mine. along with 5 other men. The mining company offered me money, lots of it, to move away from our family home. But I won't leave. This land knows me and I know its secrets. My name is Margaret Winslow, and I'm what folks around here call a healer. My grandmother taught me about the plants that grow on these mountains, which ones can cure a fever, ease pain, or help with sleep. Our cabin's been here for 4 generations, passed down from mother to daughter, each of us learning the old ways of healing. This morning started like any other. I was in my herb garden before sunrise, gathering fresh mint for tea, when I noticed something odd. The morning dew felt different, oily, and there was a silence in the air that made the hair on my neck stand up. Usually, the woods around my cabin are full of bird songs and squirrel chatter, but today there was nothing. Just your imagination playing tricks, I told myself, but deep down, I knew better. These mountains talk to those who know how to listen, and today they were trying to tell me something. I walked back to check on my chickens. They were huddled in the corner of their coop, not making a sound. Normally, they'd be pecking around the yard by now, but something had spooked them. When I opened the coop door, they didn't even move. The mining company man, Calvin Pierce, showed up later that morning in his shiny blue car. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I make in 3 months selling my herbal remedies. "To folks in town, Mrs. Winslow," he said, holding out an envelope, "I've got an offer here that you really should consider. The company's willing to pay double what we offered last month." I didn't even look at the envelope. "Mr. Pierce, I told you before, this land isn't for sale. My husband died in your mine, and now you want to take my home too?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The thing is, Mrs. Winslow, we're going to be mining under your property, whether you sell or not. We own the mineral rights to everything below 100 feet. "Then I guess you'll have to work around me," I said, turning back to my garden. But as he drove away, I felt a tremor under my feet. Just a small one, but it was enough to make my mint tea ripple in its cup. That night I dreamed of Robert. He was calling to me from somewhere deep underground, his voice muffled like he was speaking through layers of earth. "Maggie," he called, using his special name for me. "Maggie, they're coming, they're waking up." I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The floor beneath my bed was vibrating so slightly I almost thought I was imagining it. But then I heard it, a scratching sound, coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards. My old dog Blue started growling at the corner of the room, his hackles raised. I got up and grabbed the flashlight from my bedside table when I shined it. At the floor, I could have sworn I saw the wooden boards move, just a little, like something was pushing up from below. The next morning, I found claw marks on the big oak tree behind the cabin. They were deep, cutting into the wood like knife marks, but they didn't look like bear claws or anything else I'd ever seen in these woods. And they were high up, higher than any animal should be able to reach. Tobias Jenkins, who hunts these woods, stopped by with some troubling news. He'd been out tracking deer when he heard strange howling coming from one of the old mine shafts. "Not like wolves," he said, shaking his head. "Something else, something that shouldn't be there." I nodded, thinking of the claw marks, the tremors, the silence in the woods. "The mining company's been doing a lot of blasting lately," I told him. "Maybe they disturbed something." "Maybe," he said, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was. This was something more than just mining work. That afternoon, I decided to check the well water. It had been tasting funny lately, and when I pulled up a bucket, my heart nearly stopped. The water was black as ink, with an oily sheen that caught the sunlight in strange ways. As I watched, it slowly cleared, like whatever had tainted it was sinking back down into the depths. I went inside and pulled out Robert's old mining maps from the chest where I'd stored his things. There, spread out on the kitchen table, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The official maps showed the mine tunnels stopping well short of our property. But Robert had drawn in other tunnels, dozens of them, stretching right under our land, and in the margin, in my husband's messy handwriting, were the words, "Keep them sealed." A knock at the door made me jump. It was Abigail Turner, my last remaining neighbor. Her face was pale. "Margaret," she whispered, "I saw Robert last night. He was walking at the edge of the woods, but something wasn't right about him. The way he moved, it wasn't human." I felt the blood drain from my face, because I knew deep in my bones that whatever Abigail had seen, it wasn't my husband. And whatever the mining company had woken up down there in the dark, it was just the beginning. The ground trembled again, stronger this time, and somewhere in the distance I heard a sound that might have been howling, or might have been laughter. Woke up to Blue's barking. It was still dark outside, and at first I thought he'd spotted a raccoon or maybe a deer, but this wasn't his normal bark. This was panic. I found him in the basement, scratching at the dirt floor like he was trying to dig to china. His nails were bleeding, but he wouldn't stop. When I tried to pull him away, he whimpered and kept looking at the same spot. "Blue, stop," I said, but then I heard it too, scratching sounds coming from under the dirt, not like moles or groundhogs. This was different. It sounded almost deliberate. I shined my flashlight at the spot. The dirt was moving, just slightly, like something was pushing up from below. My hands started shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd lived in these mountains my whole life. Whatever this was, I could handle it. Just then, the biggest earthquake yet shook the house. Mason jars fell off the shelves and shattered. Blue ran upstairs howling. I grabbed onto the wall to keep from falling, and that's when I saw it. A crack, opening up in the basement floor, right where Blue had been digging. When the shaking stopped, I grabbed a shovel and carefully approached the crack. It was about 3 feet long and 6 inches wide. Steam was coming out of it, which didn't make any sense. It should have been cold down there. I poked at the edge with my shovel, and a chunk of dirt fell away. There was something underneath, not dirt or rock, but what looked like a smooth tunnel, wall, too smooth to be natural. That's when I remembered my great-grandmother's journal. I'd found it in the attic years ago, but never paid much attention to it. Now something told me I needed to read it again. I spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, reading by lamplight. Most of it was normal stuff, recipes for medicines, notes about the weather. But then I found it, near the back. The hollow. Folk are stirring again. They wear faces that ain't their own. 3 families must keep watch, must keep the door sealed. My hands were trembling as I turned the page. There was a drawing that looked like some kind of dog standing on 2 legs, but with long fingers and eyes that were too human. The next morning, I decided to check out the old mine entrance near my property. I knew I probably shouldn't go alone, but who could I trust? Abigail had seen something that looked like Robert, but wasn't him. The sheriff thought I was just a crazy widow. And the mining company. Well, I was starting to think they knew more than they were letting on. I packed a bag with water, some food, my flashlight, and Robert's old mining helmet. The entrance was overgrown with weeds, but I could tell someone had been there recently. The chains on the gate were new. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard voices. I ducked behind some bushes as Calvin Pierce and 2 other men in suits walked up to the entrance. "The vibrations are getting stronger," one of the men said. "We need to speed up the timeline." Calvin nodded. "What about the Winslow woman?" "She'll be dealt with," the other man said, but his voice sounded wrong, like he was talking through gravel. I held my breath as they unlocked the gate and went inside. After a few minutes, I crept closer to the entrance. That's when I heard it. Not voices anymore, but a kind of howling that made my skin crawl. It echoed up from deep in the mine, and mixed with it was a sound like rocks grinding together. I ran all the way home. Blue was waiting on the porch, and when he saw me, he started barking at something behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just my own shadow stretching across the yard, except I was facing west, and the sun was setting behind me. My shadow should have been in front of me, not behind. I grabbed Blue and ran inside, locking every door and window. As the sun set, I heard movement outside, something circling the house. The footsteps sounded almost human, but not quite. They were too heavy, and there was a clicking sound with each step, like claws on wood. "Margaret!" a voice called. It sounded exactly like Robert. "Maggie, honey, let me in. I'm cold out here." Blue growled low in his throat. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from screaming, because I knew deep in my soul that whatever was out there, it wasn't my husband. I stayed up all night listening to that thing where my dead husband's voice, begging to be let in. Sometimes it sounded like Robert, sometimes like Calvin Pierce, sometimes like voices I didn't recognize. But always underneath, there was that wrong sound, like gravel in their throats. When morning came, I found claw marks on every door and window, and in the dirt outside there were footprints. They started out looking like human shoes, but got more and more distorted until they looked like huge dog paws walking on two legs. I knew then that I had to find out what was in my great-grandmother's journal. What were the hollow folk? What door was supposed to stay sealed? And most importantly, what had the mining company woken up under my mountain? The next morning, Blue was gone. All I found was his collar near the basement door, covered in something dark that looked like blood. My hands shook as I picked it up. Blue had been my only friend these past few months, and now I jumped at a knock on the door. It was Abigail again, but something was wrong. She smiled at me, but her smile was too wide, like someone who'd only seen pictures of smiles and was trying to copy one. "Margaret," she said, her voice flat. "Can I come in? I need to tell you something about Robert." I kept the chain on the door. "Abigail, when did we first meet?" She kept smiling that wrong smile. "Why, we've been neighbors for years." "No," I said quietly. "We met at the county fair 3 summers ago. You were selling honey, and I was selling herbs." The thing wearing Abigail's face stopped smiling. Its eyes turned black, and when it spoke again, its voice had that gravelly sound I'd heard at the mine. "Let us in, Margaret. You can't keep us out forever." I slammed the door and ran to my bedroom. Under the bed was a loose floorboard where Robert had hidden his gun. As I pulled it up, I found something else, a letter in Robert's handwriting. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. The mining company isn't just digging for coal. They found something down there, something old, something that's been sleeping. I tried to stop them, but there's a room in the basement Pa never told you about. Behind the old coal bin there's a door. The combination is your birthday. Everything you need to know is in there. I love you. I'm sorry, Robert." My hands were trembling as I moved the coal bin. Sure enough, there was a metal door built into the wall with a combination lock. I put in my birthday, 0815, and it clicked open. The room was small, maybe 10 feet square. The walls were covered in maps and old photographs. There was a gun rack with rifles I'd never seen before, boxes of strange-looking ammunition, and journals, dozens of them going back over 100 years. I grabbed the newest-looking journal and started reading. What I found made my blood run cold. The creatures had been here longer than us. They lived deep underground, in huge caves that ran all through the mountains. They could shape the earth itself, making tunnels and causing earthquakes. And worst of all, they could wear human skin like a suit, copying our faces and voices to trick us. According to the journal, 3 families had been chosen to guard the sealed entrances to their world: the Winslows, the Turners, and the Jenkinses. That's why Tobias Jenkins had been the one to warn me about the howling. That's why Abigail Turner had seen the thing pretending to be Robert. But the mining company had broken the seals. They'd found the creatures and made some kind of deal with them. The company got the coal, and the creatures got us. A loud crash from upstairs made me jump. Something was in the house. I could hear heavy footsteps moving around and that clicking sound of claws on wood. I grabbed one of the rifles and some ammunition. The journal said the creatures could be hurt by certain sounds and by weapons blessed with mountain herbs. The same herbs my family had been growing for generations. I heard something coming down the basement stairs. In the dim light, I saw Calvin. Pierce, but his movements were jerky, wrong. As he got closer, his skin seemed to ripple, like something underneath was trying to get out. "Mrs. Winslow," he said in that gravelly voice, "we really need to talk about your property." I raised the rifle. "You're not Calvin Pierce." He smiled and his face split open like a ripe melon. Underneath was something that looked like a dog's head, but wrong. The snout was too long, the teeth too human. Its black eyes fixed on me. "No," it said in a voice like rocks grinding together. "I'm not." I fired the rifle. The blessed bullet hit it right in the chest. The creature screamed, a sound that was part howl, part human cry, and fell backward. Its skin sloughed off like a snake shedding, leaving behind something I can barely describe. I ran past it, up the stairs, and out of the house. In the yard I saw more of them, things that looked almost human but weren't quite right. Some still wore pieces of human skin, hanging loose like old clothes. As I ran toward my truck, I saw movement in the mines on the hillside. More creatures were emerging, crawling up from the deep places below. And behind them all, I heard a sound that shook the whole mountain, something huge moving in the darkness beneath. I knew then that this wasn't just about saving my home anymore. This was about saving everyone. The creatures were coming, and I was one of the only people left who knew how to fight them. But first, I needed to find Tobias Jenkins. If his family had been guardians too, maybe he knew things I didn't. Maybe together we could figure out how to seal the creatures back underground before they took over completely. I jumped in my truck and started the engine, watching in the rear view mirror as the things that weren't human gathered around my family's cabin. One of them looked right at me with Robert's face, but now I could see the wrongness beneath, like a mask that didn't quite fit. As I drove away, I heard their howls echo across the mountain. They were calling to others of their kind, telling them it was time to wake up, time to hunt, and I was the only one who could stop them. I drove through the darkness to Tobias Jenkins' cabin, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Every shadow looked like one of those creatures, and every tree branch scratching against my truck made me jump. Tobias was waiting on his porch with a rifle when I pulled up. "I've been expecting you," he said. "Found some tracks around my chicken. Coop, that ain't natural. Reckon you've seen them too." Inside his cabin, Tobias pulled out an old wooden chest. It was covered in strange carvings that looked like the ones from my great-grandmother's journal. "My grandpa told me stories," he said, opening the chest. "Said there'd come a day when the hollow folk would try to come back. Said we'd need these." He pulled out what looked like old wind chimes, but made of dark metal I'd never seen before. "They can't stand certain sounds," he explained. "These were made special from metal found deep in the mountains. The sound hurts them real bad." "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Same way you do. It's in our blood." He showed me his family's journal. "Your family guarded the east entrance, mine guarded the west, and the Turners watched the north. But now the mining company's broken. All the seals," I finished. "But why? What do they get out of this?" Tobias's face got dark. "Money, power. The creatures can sense where the richest coal seams are. They can shape the earth, make tunnels without machines. The company thinks they can control them. But they can't," I said, remembering the thing wearing Calvin Pierce's face. "No, ma'am, they sure can't. These things, they're ancient, patient. They've been down there longer than people have been walking these hills. And now they're hungry." Just then we heard a car coming up the drive. Through the window I saw headlights, a police car. "That'll be Sheriff Mills," Tobias said. "I called him before you got here. Figure we need all the help we can get." But when the car door opened, my heart stopped. The thing that stepped out looked like Sheriff Mills, but its movements were stiff, mechanical. And its eyes... "Get down!" I shouted just as it raised a gun. The window shattered. Tobias and I hit the floor as bullets flew over our heads. I could hear more cars pulling up outside. "The back door," Tobias whispered. "Through the kitchen." We crawled through the house as the fake Sheriff Mills kept shooting. In the kitchen, I grabbed the wind chimes from where Tobias had dropped them. More creatures were coming around the sides of the house, some wearing police uniforms, others looking like normal people from town, but they all moved wrong, like puppets on strings. "The root cellar," Tobias said. "There's a tunnel. The old folks dug it years ago, just in case." We made it to the cellar just as they broke down the front door. I could hear them inside the house, their claws clicking on the wooden floors. The tunnel was narrow and dark, barely big enough to crawl through. We could hear them following us, their bodies scraping against the dirt walls. "Where does this lead?" I whispered. "The old church," Tobias said. "The real one, not the new building in town, the one made with mountain stone." I remembered that. Church. A tiny building deep in the woods that most folks had forgotten about. My grandmother used to say it was built on holy ground. We were almost to the end when I heard something behind us, a sound like wet leather stretching. I looked back and saw them shedding their human skins, showing their true forms in the darkness. I grabbed the wind chimes and shook them hard. The sound they made wasn't like any wind chimes I'd ever heard. It was deep, almost below hearing, but it made my teeth hurt. The creatures screamed. The sound of the chimes must have hurt them way worse than it hurt us. They backed away, covering what passed for their ears with their long-fingered hands. We burst out of the tunnel into the old church. Moonlight streamed through the broken windows, showing walls covered in symbols like the ones in our journals. "Look," Tobias said, pointing at the floor. There was a huge circle carved into the stone, filled with more symbols. "This is what they're afraid of. This is what keeps them down. But the mining company broke the seals," I said. "How do we put them back?" Tobias pulled out his journal. "There's a ritual, something our families have passed down, but..." He looked grim. "It needs blood from all 3 Guardian families, and Abigail Turner isn't Abigail anymore," I finished. I remembered the thing wearing her face at my door. The ground started shaking. Through the broken windows we could see lights coming from the mine entrance on the hillside. Not electric lights, but a weird glow, like green fire. "They're calling their queen," Tobias said. "Once she comes up, there'll be no stopping them." I thought about Robert, about Blue, about all the people in town who had no idea what was coming. "Then we better figure something out fast," I said, "because I'm not letting those things take our home." Tobias nodded and opened his journal. "There might be another way, but you're not going to like it." "The only way to seal them back is to go down there," Tobias said, pointing to a map in his journal. "The main seal has to be fixed from both sides, above and below." My stomach turned. "You mean one of us has to go into their tunnels?" "Both of us. And we need Turner blood." He pulled out a small glass bottle. This was from Abigail, the real Abigail. She gave it to me last week, said she had a feeling something bad was coming. We could hear howling getting closer. The wind chimes would only hold them off for so long. "The mining company's main entrance is the closest," I said, "but it'll be crawling with those things." Tobias smiled and pulled something else from his pack. Sticks of dynamite. Good thing I used to work in the mines, too. We took my truck, driving with the headlights off. The moon was bright enough to see by, and we didn't want them spotting us. As we got closer to the mine entrance, we saw more of them. Shapes that looked almost human, moving in the darkness. The main gate was open. 2 guards stood there, but their heads moved in jerky motions like broken dolls, not human anymore. "Ready?" Tobias whispered. I nodded and grabbed the wind chimes. Tobias lit the first stick of dynamite and threw it far to the left of the entrance. When it exploded, the fake guards ran to check it out. We slipped inside. The tunnel lights were on, casting long shadows. Every few feet there were marks on the walls, claw marks getting bigger as we went deeper. That's when we heard it, a sound that shook dust from the ceiling. It was like 100 dogs howling at once, but mixed with something else, something that made my bones vibrate. "The Queen," Tobias said. "She's awake." We came to a fork in the tunnel. The left path was man-made, with railroad tracks for the coal carts. The right one was different. The walls were smooth, like they'd been melted instead of dug. "Right," I said. "They made that tunnel." The smooth tunnel led down, getting bigger as we went. The air got warmer and there was a smell like rotten eggs. Our flashlight beams showed more symbols carved into the walls, the same ones from the church. We found what was left of the seal in a huge cave. It was like the circle in the church, but bigger, carved into the floor and ceiling. Pieces of it were broken, and dark shapes moved in the tunnels beyond it. "How do we fix it?" I whispered. Tobias pointed to 3 spots around the circle. "Blood from each family. Then we say the words from the journal." But he looked at the far end of the cave. "We have to deal with her first. Something was coming, something big." The ground shook with each step, and I could hear that wet leather sound of skin stretching and changing. She came out of the darkness like a nightmare. She was 3 times bigger than the others, with a face that was both dog and human, and neither. Her skin looked like it was made of moving shadows, and her eyes knew me. "Margaret," she said, in a voice that was 1,000 voices speaking together. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." "Stay back," I said, shaking the wind. "Chimes," she laughed. "Those won't work on me, child. I am not like my children. I am the first, the oldest. I was here when your kind still lived in caves." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because we're hungry," she said simply. "And your kind has finally dug deep enough to let us out. The mining company thought they could control us. Such sweet, stupid prey." While she talked, Tobias was moving slowly around the edge of the cave, placing dynamite. I had to keep her distracted. "What happened to my husband?" I asked. "Did you kill him?" "Oh no," she smiled, showing too many teeth. "He's part of us now. Would you like to see?" Something stepped out of the shadows behind her. It looked like Robert, but wrong, like someone had tried to build a person out of dog parts. His eyes were black and empty. "Maggie," it said in Robert's voice, "join us, be part of our family." Tears ran down my face, but I held my ground. "You're not Robert. My husband died in this mine." The Queen laughed again. "Are you sure about that?" Tobias had finished placing the dynamite. He was back at my side, holding his journal and the bottle of Turner blood. "Now!" he shouted. I threw the wind chimes as hard as I could at the Queen's face. They wouldn't hurt her, but they distracted her for a second. That's all we needed. We ran to the circle, pouring our blood in the right spots. Tobias read the words from his journal, strange, old words that made my ears hurt. The Queen screamed. The whole cave shook. The thing wearing Robert's face lunged at us, but I shot it with blessed bullets. It fell, its skin melting away. "You can't seal us away again." The Queen howled. "We are eternal." "Maybe," I said, pulling out the detonator Tobias had given me. "But our families have been keeping you down here for generations, and we're not stopping now." I pressed the button. The dynamite exploded, bringing down tons of rock. The Queen screamed again, but this time in fear. The circle on the floor started to glow. "Run!" Tobias yelled. We ran back up the tunnel as the cave collapsed behind us. I could hear the Queen howling, feel her trying to follow us. But the seal was working. The glowing circle was pulling her and her children back down, back into the deep dark where they belonged. We barely made it out before the whole mine entrance caved in. Standing there in the moonlight, covered in dirt and blood, we watched as the mountains settled. "Is it over?" I asked. Tobias nodded slowly. "For now, but someone needs to stay and watch." Make sure they don't try to dig them up again. I looked at my family's land, thinking of all the generations that had guarded it before me. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Later that night, sitting on my porch with a cup of mint tea, I heard a scratching at the door. When I opened it, there was Blue, dirty and tired, but alive. He dug his way out when the creatures were pulled back down. I hugged him tight, knowing we still had work to do. The mining company would try again. Other people would come, wanting to dig up what should stay buried. But that's why my family had stayed here all these years. That's why we'd learned the old ways, the healing ways. Someone had to protect this land, had to keep the ancient secrets, and as long as I was alive, that someone would be me. I never thought silence could be so loud until I came to these woods. The day I drove up to my new home, if you could call this broken-down cabin a home, the leaves were just starting to turn orange. September in northern Maine is usually beautiful, but all I could see was emptiness. Empty like the passenger seat beside me where Sarah used to sit. Empty like the back seat where little Tommy's car seat was now missing. 6 months after the accident, and sometimes I still turn to tell Sarah something, only to remember she's gone. Maybe that's why I bought this place, 30 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by pine trees older than America itself. The realtor thought I was crazy. That old logging cabin, she'd said. It's been empty for years. No electricity, no phone lines. The last owner just disappeared. Perfect, I'd thought. After 15 years of teaching military survival courses, I knew how to live off the grid. And right now, being alone was exactly what I needed, or so I thought. I spent that first week fixing up the cabin like a man possessed. Every hammer strike, every saw cut, every log I split for firewood, it was all to keep my mind busy. I had enough supplies to last 6 months. Canned food, dried meat, tools, ammunition for hunting, and my trusty hunting dog Rex by my side. I'd learned in the military to be prepared for anything. Well, almost anything. It was old Elias Thornton who first tried to warn me. I met him at the general store in town while picking up my last supplies. He was a small man with eyes that had seen too much, the kind of local shopkeeper who knows everyone's business. "You're the one buying the Henderson cabin?" he asked, his wrinkled hands pausing as he rang up my supplies. "That's right, planning to stay through winter." When I nodded, his face went pale. "Folks don't winter up there, not since the stories started." I remember laughing. After all I'd seen in my military days, some local ghost story wasn't going to scare me. "What stories?" The long walker. He whispered, looking around like someone might hear. "That's what the old-timers call it, the hunger that walks on 2 legs. Something in those woods? It ain't natural." I thanked him for the warning, but inside I was rolling my eyes. Every small town has its monsters, I thought. Its legends. I'd dealt with real monsters. War, death, the drunk driver who took my family. What could these woods possibly throw at me that was worse? That first night in the cabin, I got my answer. Sort of. I was sitting on the porch, Rex at my feet, watching the sun set behind the endless wall of pines. As darkness crept in, I noticed something strange. The woods went quiet, not the normal quiet of nightfall when day creatures bed down and night creatures wake up. This was different. This was wrong. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on the whole forest. No crickets, no owls, not even the wind in the trees. Just a silence so complete it made my ears ring. Rex noticed it too. His ears perked up, and he let out a low whine I'd never heard before. This was a dog who'd been through combat training, who didn't scare easily, but something about that silence set him on edge. "It's nothing, boy," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. Just the woods settling down for the night. But as I headed inside and locked the door, something I'd never planned to do out here, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't empty at all. It felt like something listening. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, remembering Elias's words about the long walker. In the military, they taught us that fear is just the body's way of saying pay attention. And right now, every instinct I had was screaming at me to pay attention. But to what? I didn't know it then, but that first week of silence was just the beginning. Looking back now, I wish I'd listened to Elias. I wish I'd packed up and left while I still could. Because what came next? Well, let me tell you about the day the game trails disappeared, and I started to realize just how wrong things could get in these ancient woods. I've spent my whole life in the woods. I know how they work. Animals make trails, like highways through the forest. These trails don't just vanish overnight, except they did. It happened about a week after that first silent night. I'd been tracking a deer path, a good one that I'd marked for hunting. The morning was foggy, but I knew these trails by heart already. Rex and I headed out at dawn, same as always, but the trail was gone. Not overgrown, not covered up, just gone, like it had never been there. This can't be right, I muttered, checking my compass for the third time. Rex whined and pressed against my leg, something he only did when he was scared. We were here yesterday, boy, you remember. I found other trails too, all gone. In their place were new tracks I couldn't explain. They looked almost human, but wrong. Too big, the stride too long. Any normal person would have to jump to make prints that far apart. Probably bears, I told Rex, but I didn't believe it. Bears don't walk on two legs for miles. Bears don't leave footprints that look like a person's, just stretched out and twisted. That night, I checked my meat storage. Deer and rabbit I'd caught and dried the week before. The smell hit me as soon as I opened the door. It had all gone bad, every piece. The meat was black and rotten, even though I'd preserved it exactly like I'd done hundreds of times before. But that wasn't the worst part. I was sitting in the cabin that evening, trying to get the radio to work. Usually I could at least get some static, maybe a weather report if I was lucky. Instead, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Marshall? Honey, where are you? Sarah's voice. My dead wife's voice coming through that radio clear as day. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. It hit the floor, crackling with static again. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief plays tricks on your mind, right? But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. The woods were getting quieter too. Each day, the circle of silence around my cabin grew larger. First, the birds stopped singing. Then the squirrels disappeared. Even the insects went quiet. It was like everything was holding its breath, waiting for something. Rex noticed it too. He'd been a brave dog his whole life, but now he wouldn't go near the northern part of the forest. He'd plant his feet and refuse to move or turn around and run back to the cabin. Then I found the marks. They were carved into the trees in a perfect line, like a boundary. Not fresh cuts. These looked old, the bark grown around them. Each one was the same, a simple symbol that looked like an eye with a line through it. I'd never seen anything like it in all my years outdoors. I told myself there were logical explanations for everything. The trails, animals just changed their patterns. The meat, I must have made a mistake preserving it. The radio, just missing. My family, hearing things that weren't there, but at night, lying in my bed, listening to that heavy silence, I couldn't fool myself anymore. Something was wrong in these woods. Really wrong, and it was getting closer. I remember the exact moment I realized how much trouble I was in. I was checking my hunting traps, the ones I'd set up all around the property. Every single one had been triggered, but they were empty. Not just empty, someone or something had taken whatever was caught and arranged the traps in perfect circles, all pointing toward my cabin. That's when I knew. I wasn't just watching these woods, they were watching me back. The weather changed too early that year. By early October, when it should have been crisp and cool, the temperature dropped like a stone. The cold brought fog with it, thick white fog that hugged the ground and never seemed to fully clear, even at noon. That's when I saw it for the first time. I was splitting wood at dusk, trying to build up my pile before the snow came. The fog was rolling in, making everything look fuzzy around the edges. That's when something moved between the trees. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but shadows don't stand that tall. Shadows don't make the air feel like ice when they move. And shadows definitely don't watch you with eyes that glow like dying embers. It was there for maybe 3 seconds, just long enough for me to see how thin it was, how it seemed to stretch up into the branches, just long enough for me to know that whatever I saw, it wasn't human. I dropped my axe and ran inside, spent the whole night with my rifle in my lap, jumping at every little sound. The next morning I tried to tell myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. And I wasn't the only one who knew something was out there. Edward Cahill showed up the next day with supplies from town. He was an old hunting guide, the kind who knew every tree and rock in these woods, but even he looked nervous. "Came to check on you," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Elias mentioned you were staying through winter." "That's the plan," I said, helping him unload his truck. "Though some strange things have been happening." Edward's face went pale. "You've seen it, haven't seen it, the tall one?" I nodded slowly. He sat down hard on my porch steps. "First time I saw it was 30 years ago. Lost 3 clients that season. They just vanished. No bodies, no traces, like the forest swallowed them whole." "Why didn't anyone report it?" "Oh, they did. Every decade or so, someone disappears up here. Police come, search parties, comb the woods. They never find anything." He looked at me hard. "You know why?" I shook my head. "Because it doesn't leave traces. Not normal ones anyway, but it leaves other signs like that." He pointed at my cabin windows. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was something smeared across the glass. It looked like mud, but darker, thicker. When I got closer, I saw it was arranged in patterns, swirls and lines that made my head hurt to look at. That night, Rex wouldn't stop growling at the corners of the cabin, not just one spot. He kept moving from corner to corner like he was tracking something we couldn't see. His fur stood up in spikes, and he wouldn't let me near the windows. I tried to radio for help, but all I got was static. Well, mostly static. Sometimes in the white noise, I could hear voices, my wife, my son, calling my name, begging me to come find them. I knew it wasn't really them. Whatever was out there, it was using their voices to get to me. And it was working. "We need to leave," I told Rex that night, packing my bags. "First thing in the morning, we're getting out of here." But when morning came, the fog was so thick I couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. And the voices from the radio were getting louder. They were calling me north, into the deepest part of the woods, into the place where Rex wouldn't go, into the place where the shadow stood up and watched with burning eyes. And somehow, deep in my gut, I knew, even if I tried to leave now, the woods wouldn't let me go. Not anymore, because I wasn't just living in these woods now. I was becoming part of them. I found the deer on a Tuesday morning. At least, I think it was a Tuesday. The days had started to blur together. The deer wasn't just dead. Something. I had arranged it like a sick kind of art piece near my water source. Its bones were twisted into shapes that bones shouldn't make. And the worst part? All the meat was gone, but there were no bite marks, no claw marks, just clean, empty bones. That same day the radio changed. It wasn't just catching bits and pieces of Sarah's voice anymore. Now I could hear whole conversations, Tommy's laugh, Sarah talking about dinner plans, things I remembered from when they were alive. "Daddy, why won't you come play with me?" Tommy's voice was so clear, so real, I almost answered. But then I remembered my son had been 6 when he died. The voice on the radio sounded older, like he'd grown up, like something was trying to guess what he'd sound like now. That night, Rex disappeared. Woke up to scratching at the door. Rex always slept inside with me, but somehow he'd gotten out. When I opened the door, calling his name, all I found was blood. Not much, just drops making a trail heading north. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and followed the trail. I know, stupid move, right? But Rex was all I had left. I couldn't lose him too. The blood drops led me deeper into the woods than I'd ever gone. The trees seemed to grow thicker here, older, their branches tangled together overhead like gnarled fingers, blocking out what little moonlight there was. Then things got weird. One minute I was following the trail, my flashlight beam bouncing off the trees. The next minute, I was back at my cabin. The sun was up. 6 hours had passed, but I couldn't remember a single thing after entering those woods. My clothes were clean, no mud, no snow, even though I'd been walking through both. My rifle was still fully loaded, even though I was sure I'd fired it at something. I just couldn't remember what. Shaking, I checked the camera I'd set up to watch the cabin while I was gone. What I saw made my blood freeze. The first few hours of footage were normal. Then, at exactly midnight, something walked into frame. It looked like a person, sort of, but it was too tall, too thin. Its arms hung down past its knees, and its face. I rewound and paused the video, even though every part of me screamed not to look. Where its face should have been, there was just hunger. That's the only way I can describe it. Like someone had taken every starving thing in the world and twisted them into a shape that looked almost human. But the worst part came next. In the video, it walked right up to my cabin door, reached out one long bony hand, and opened it, the door I know I'd locked, the door that was still locked when I got back. That's when I realized, whatever this thing was, locks couldn't stop it. Walls couldn't stop it, and somewhere out in those woods it had my dog. I tried to eat something to keep my strength up, but the food, it was like eating cardboard. Everything tasted the same, flat, empty, dead. No matter how much I ate, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling in my stomach. That night, I had my first dream. I was running through the woods, but not on two legs. I was low to the ground, moving fast, hunting. I could smell blood on the wind, fresh meat. My mouth watered. My stomach cramped with hunger. I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and blood in my mouth. And somewhere in the darkness outside, I heard Rex's collar jingling. Inside my locked cabin, the blizzard hit 3 weeks too early. One morning I woke up, and the world was white. But this wasn't normal snow. It moved wrong. The wind would blow from the east, but the snow would fall north. Sometimes the snowflakes would just stop in midair, hanging there like they were frozen in time. I found the bones that morning. They were arranged in a perfect circle around my cabin. Rabbit bones, deer bones, and some I didn't want to identify. They made a pattern, like a child's connect-the-dots puzzle. But this pattern seemed to point to something north. My camera kept taking pictures every hour, like I'd set it to. Each morning I'd check them, even though I was scared of what I'd find. The thing, I couldn't call it a person anymore, was getting braver. Each night it came closer to the cabin. First night, it stood at the tree line watching. Second night, it was halfway to the cabin. Third night, it was on my porch. Fourth night, its face was pressed against my window. I couldn't see its eyes in the photos, but I could feel them. Like it wasn't just looking at my cabin, it was looking into me. That's when I found Rex's collar. I was making my bed, trying to do normal things, you know, when I heard something jingle under my pillow. Rex's collar, the one he was wearing when he disappeared. It was impossible. The doors were locked. The windows were shut. But there it was. Sleep got worse after that. Every night I'd hear it walking around the cabin, not on the ground, on the walls, like a spider tapping its way around, trying to find a way in. But it didn't need to find a way in, did it? It could get in whenever it wanted. It was playing with me. Then I found the journal. I was pulling up loose floorboards, trying to figure out if there was a way something could be getting in from underneath. Instead, I found an old notebook, the last owner's diary. The pages were water-stained and yellow, but I could still read them. The more I read, the more my hands shook. Day 47. The hunger is getting worse. Food turns to ash in my mouth. All I can think about is meat, raw meat. Day 53. I saw it clearly today. It's so tall, so thin. But somehow when I look at it, it feels familiar. Like looking in a mirror, but the reflection is wrong. Day 60. The dreams are getting worse. I'm hunting in them. Not with guns, with teeth and claws. And the worst part, I'm enjoying it. Day 65. I understand now. It's not hunting me. It's changing me, making me like it. And part of me wants it to. The last entry was just one line. I'm so hungry. After reading that, I looked in my bathroom mirror for the first time in days. My face. It wasn't my face anymore. My cheeks were hollow, my eyes were sunk deep in their sockets, my teeth, had they always been that sharp? The calendar on my wall didn't make sense anymore. Days were missing, whole weeks. I'd check it at night, go to sleep, and wake up to find marks crossed off that I didn't remember crossing. And the hunger. God, the hunger. I'd eat and eat, but nothing helped. Everything tasted like nothing, except in my dreams. In my dreams, I could taste everything. And what I was eating in those dreams, I don't want to talk about what I was eating in those dreams, but the worst part, sometimes when I woke up from those dreams, I could still taste it, and I wanted more. The snow let up for a few hours on what I think was a Thursday. I'd lost track of time, but I knew this was my chance. I packed a bag with food, water and my rifle. The truck wouldn't start. Nothing electrical worked anymore. But I knew these woods. I could walk out. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. I started walking south, following my compass. After an hour, I saw my cabin ahead of me. That's impossible, I thought. I'd been walking straight south the whole time. So I tried again. This time I used the sun to guide me. Another hour of walking. There was my cabin again. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. The GPS was dead, but I'd downloaded offline maps. I would not get lost again. Third try. This time I walked for 2 hours straight, checking my position. Every few minutes, and there it was. My cabin. Like the woods were just one big circle, always leading back to where I started. That's when I heard the radio crackling from inside. Someone was trying to reach me. Rescue team approaching cabin from south side. No response from occupant. Marshal Henley, do you copy? They were coming for me. Someone must have realized something was wrong when I stopped checking in. With the town, I ran to the cabin and grabbed the radio. Yes, I copy, I'm here. Static, then 3 men proceeding on foot, visibility poor, following trail markers. I ran outside, firing my rifle into the air. 3 shots. The universal distress signal. They had to be close now. They had to hear me. The radio crackled again. Visual contact with subject's cabin, approaching front door. But there was nobody there. Just empty snow and those weird 2 long footprints circling my cabin. That's when I saw them. 3 dark shapes in the snow, about 100 yards out. At first, I thought they were fallen trees, but when I got closer, I realized what I was looking at. 3 men, frozen solid. They were perfectly preserved in the snow, their faces locked in expressions of horror. They were positioned like they were still walking, still searching. Their hands were reaching out toward my cabin. They never had a chance to scream. The radio was still going when I stumbled back inside. Rescue team reporting successful extraction of subject, returning to base. But the men who were supposed to save me were still out there, frozen in the snow. So whose voices were these on the radio? That night, the scratching in the walls got worse. But now I could hear something else too, whispering. Not Sarah's voice this time, not Tommy's. These were the voices of the rescue team. They were begging for help. I tried to block it out, tried to sleep. But when I looked in the mirror over my bed, I saw my face changing. My eyes, they weren't my eyes anymore. They were darker, hungrier, and behind me in the mirror, standing in the corner of my room, was the thing from the woods. Only now, it didn't look so strange anymore. In fact, it almost looked familiar, like family. I found more bones under the floorboards that night. Lots of them. Some were old, maybe decades old. Some were newer, and some still had bits of rescue team uniforms clinging to them. The really scary part. When I looked at those bones, all I felt was hungry. I knew then that I couldn't leave. Not because the woods wouldn't let me, but because part of me didn't want to anymore. I ran out of food on a moonless night. The hunger was so bad I couldn't think straight. My stomach felt like it was eating itself. I had to get to my storage shed. I'd stashed some emergency supplies there. That's when I finally saw it. Really saw it. I was halfway to the shed when the snow started falling sideways. Not because of wind, there wasn't any. The snow just decided to fall sideways, like the world had tipped over. The air got so cold it hurt to breathe. Then it stepped out from behind my shed. Remember how I said it was tall? That wasn't the right word. It was endless. It stood maybe 12 feet high, but somehow it felt like it went up forever. Its body was like a deer's skeleton, wrapped in grey skin pulled too tight. But its face, God, its face. It had too many teeth. That's what I noticed first, row after row of them, like a shark's mouth, but worse because they looked human. Its eyes glowed like dying campfires, and when it looked at me, I saw myself reflected in them. Not just my face, my whole life, every meal I'd ever eaten, every hunt I'd ever made, every bit of flesh I'd ever wanted. It spoke, not with word, with hunger. Somehow I could understand it perfectly. You're almost ready. I ran, or I tried to, but the snow started making shapes. It swirled up from the ground, forming people I knew, Sarah, Tommy, Rex, the rescue team, all of them made of ice and snow, all of them reaching for me. They're all here, it said in my head. All the ones who came before, all the ones who got hungry enough to join us. That's when I understood what Edward Cahill had meant about people disappearing. They hadn't just vanished, they'd been changed, transformed, added to whatever this thing was. I made it back to the cabin somehow, slammed the door, but it didn't matter. Its voice was inside my head now. You can feel it, can't you? The hunger, the real hunger, not for food, for life, for strength, for power. It was right. The hunger I felt wasn't normal. I didn't want food. I wanted more. I wanted to hunt, to chase, to feed. I found a recorder in the cabin that night, the previous owner's last tape. His voice was shaky, desperate. It's not just a monster. It's not just killing people. It's collecting them. Every person it takes becomes part of it. Their hunger adds to its hunger. Their strength makes it stronger. And now I can feel myself becoming part of it too. If anyone finds this, run. Run before you start feeling the hunger, before you start wanting to join the hunt. The tape ended there, but I didn't need to hear more. I could see it happening to me already. My fingers were longer, my teeth sharper. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes had that same campfire glow. And the really scary part of me was happy about it. Part of me wanted to learn how to make the snow dance, how to make the woods twist in circles, how to call out in the voices of loved ones and lure in more food, more hunters to add to the hunt. But there was still a piece of me left, a piece that remembered being human, a piece that remembered Sarah's laugh and Tommy's smile, and the way Rex used to sleep by my feet. That piece knew I had one last chance to stop this. If I could just figure out how to kill something that was made up of so many people, including the part of me that was already turning into one of them. Found the books in a hidden compartment under the kitchen floorboards. They were old, really old. Some were in English, some weren't. But they all talked about the same thing, the Wendigo. The previous owner had been searching for answers too. His notes were scribbled in the margins. Native tribes knew about it for centuries. They had ways to fight it. My hands were shaking as I read. Not just from fear anymore. My body was changing faster now. My fingers were longer, bonier. I had to concentrate to hold the pages without tearing them. The books told stories about the Wendigo, how it wasn't just one monster, but many souls trapped together, how each person it took made it stronger. But there was something else, something important. The beast can be weakened. When it takes someone, that person's body remains behind, frozen but not dead. If you can find one of these bodies and I couldn't read the next part at first. My stomach turned just thinking about it, but I forced myself to look and consume part of it. You temporarily take back their strength from the Wendigo, make it weaker. That's when I remembered Edward Cahill. His frozen body was still out there, half buried in the snow. He'd been the last one taken before me. If I could find him... No way. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But the hunger had other ideas. I found something else too. An old map showing a circle of stones north of the cabin. The natives had built it centuries ago to trap the Wendigo. The previous owner had marked it the only place it can be killed. Just then, 5 more people appeared in my yard. Hikers, by the look of their gear. But they were frozen solid, arranged in a perfect circle. Their faces were twisted in fear, eyes missing, fresh victims. The Wendigo's voice whispered in my head, "More for the hunt, more for the hunger. Soon you'll help me bring them in." My nails were black now, hardening into claws. When I looked in the mirror, my face barely looked human. I could feel the hunger trying to take over my mind. But now I had a plan. A horrible plan, but a plan. I found Edward's body that night. I won't tell you what I did. I can't. But afterwards something changed. For a few hours my mind felt clearer. The hunger eased, and I could feel the Wendigo's surprise and its fear. It could be hurt. It could be killed. But to do it, I'd have to go to that stone circle. And I'd have to do something even worse than what I'd already done. I found an old ritual in the books, something the natives used to destroy evil spirits. But it needed a sacrifice, someone who was part Wendigo, but still part human, someone like me. I looked at my hands, now more like claws, felt my 2 sharp teeth with my tongue. The hunger was getting stronger again. Soon there wouldn't be enough of me left to make the choice. I had to do it now. I grabbed the books, matches, and my knife. The Wendigo was out there, watching, waiting. But for the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid of it. Because now I knew how to end this, even if it meant ending myself along with it. I knew what I had to do. The ritual needed fire, lots of it. So I grabbed everything that would burn, books, furniture, my clothes, all of it. Soaked them in gasoline from my generator. My hands weren't hands anymore. They were grey, twisted things with black claws. My teeth were too sharp to close my mouth properly, and the hunger, it was screaming inside me now, but I still had enough of myself left. Enough to end this. I set the first fire right outside my cabin. A big one. Flames leaped up into the dark sky, and for the first time in weeks, the snow stopped falling. The Wendigo's voice filled my head. "You can't fight what you're becoming." "Watch me," I growled. My voice didn't sound human anymore. I started walking, north, toward the stone circle. The Wendigo tried to stop me. The woods twisted around, trying to turn me in circles, but I could see through its tricks now. Part of me was connected to it. I could feel how it bent space and time. Snow figures rose up around me. Sarah, Tommy, Rex, all the others it had taken. Their ice faces begged me to stop, to join them. But they weren't real. The real Sarah would want me to fight. I found the stone circle under 3 feet of snow. 7 tall stones in a ring, covered in carvings. I somehow understood now. This was where the natives had trapped it before. This was where it could be killed. The Wendigo appeared as I stepped into the circle. Up close, I could see faces moving under its skin. Hundreds of them, All the people it had taken over the years, all of them trapped, all of them hungry. "You're too late," it said. "The change is almost complete." It was right. I could feel the last pieces of my humanity slipping away. The hunger was taking over. My bones were stretching, my skin pulling tight, so I did the only thing I could. I set myself on fire. The gasoline-soaked clothes went up like a torch. The pain was horrible, but the hunger was worse. As I burned, I started the ritual, speaking words I shouldn't have known in a language I'd never learned. The Wendigo screamed. Not just one scream, hundreds, all its victims crying out at once. It tried to run, but the stone circle held it. I could see it clearly now. Not just the monster, but the magic that made it. Lines of power flowing between all its victims, feeding it, keeping it alive. Lines that ran through me. "If you do this, you'll die too," it said. "I died the day you took my family," I told it. Then I grabbed it with my burning hands. The fire spread to the Wendigo like it was made of paper. All those hungry souls inside it, they were tinder waiting to burn. As the flames ate through us both, I felt them being freed. Edward Cahill, the rescue team, all of them. The Wendigo tried one last trick. As we burned together, it offered me everything: power, eternal life, an end to grief and pain. All I had to do was give in to the hunger. For a second I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But then I remembered Sarah's laugh, Tommy's smile, Rex's wet nose nudging my hand in. The morning, and I held on until the end. They found my body in the spring inside a circle of 7 stones. The official report said I died of exposure. They were wrong, but that's probably for the best. The locals know better. They say the woods are quieter now. The game trails stay where they should. The winter snows fall straight down. But every few years, someone buys that old cabin. Someone who's running from loss or pain or grief. Someone hungry for solitude. And the forest waits to see what kind of hunger they bring with them. Because that's the thing about hunger. It never really dies. It just waits for someone to feed it. Found among the personal effects of David Chen, the new owner of the Henderson cabin, dated October 2024. Mr. Chen has been missing for 3 months. The cabin remains empty. I still remember the exact moment when the cold first spoke to me. Not the everyday cold that makes you zip up your jacket or reach for a cup of hot chocolate. The other kind. The kind that watches you. My name is Eleanor Wells. I'm a glaciologist, which is just a fancy way of saying I study ice for a living. But that's not why I came to Coldridge Research Station, this forgotten little outpost hugging the Minnesota-Canadian border. I came for Michael, my twin brother, who vanished here last winter. The official story says he wandered off during a blizzard, a tragic accident. The kind that happens when you put people in places where the air freezes your lungs and darkness stretches for months. But Michael wasn't careless, and his last message to me mentioned something that's kept me awake every night since. There's something impossible moving through the ice, Ellie. Not on it, not under it, through it. The small plane that brought me here could barely land through the early winter storm. Snow whipped across the windows as we descended, and I caught my first glimpse of Coldridge, a cluster of low buildings huddled against the white emptiness like they were afraid of it. "Dr. Wells," the pilot had to shout over the engines. "Last chance to change your mind. Next supply drop's not for 6 weeks. I clutched Michael's old compass in my pocket. "I'm sure." The station chief, Dr. Victor Kozlov, met me at the landing. Strip. Tall, with a silver-streaked beard and eyes that didn't match his smile, he helped load my equipment onto the station's snowcat. "Welcome to the edge of nowhere," he said, his voice carrying a faint Russian accent. 6 of us now for winter. Lockdown. You've arrived just in time." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Storms here can last for days." The tour was quick. Laboratory spaces, living quarters barely bigger than closets, communal kitchen, storage areas. Everything smelled of coffee, industrial cleaner, and that distinct metallic scent unique to extreme cold. The station operated like a submarine, every system redundant, every procedure designed to keep death at bay. We maintain strict protocols, Kozlov explained as he showed me the heavy thermal gear required for outdoor sampling. No one goes outside alone. No exceptions. Temperature drops below -40. All external activities cease. Communications. Check every 4 hours when anyone's outside the perimeter. I nodded at all the right moments while setting up my specialized equipment, ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging tools, and custom ice core extractors. All the things a glaciologist would need, plus a few extras I'd brought for my real investigation. Your brother was well liked here, Kozlov said suddenly that first evening in the mess hall. A brilliant scientist. I looked up from my untouched stew. Was there anything unusual about his research before he disappeared? Something flickered across Kozlov's face. Nothing in his official reports. The word official hung in the air between us. The next morning, I met the rest of the skeleton crew. Gregory Hayes, the meteorologist with an aggressive beard and a gentle voice. Samantha Miles, marine biologist studying cold water adaptations, whose laugh seemed too bright for this dark place. Jensen Kumar, communications specialist who barely looked up from his screens. And Abigail Kingfisher. Abigail's eyes widened slightly when Kozlov introduced us. Another Wells, she said. She was an Ojibwe woman who served as the station's mechanical, engineer and technical specialist. I worked with your brother. Later that day, she found me alone in the lab. Michael talked about you, she said. I saved some of his things before they packed everything up. Thought his family might want them someday. She led me to a storage closet and pulled out a weatherproof case. Inside were Michael's personal notebooks, a thumb drive, and his backup field journal. He was looking for something out there, Abigail said quietly. Something he wouldn't put in the official logs. That night, I read Michael's journals by the dim light of my desk lamp. Most entries were ordinary, temperature recordings, ice sample notes, equipment maintenance. But then, starting 3 weeks before his disappearance, the tone changed. Day 47, ice core sample B16 shows crystalline anomalies unlike anything in literature. Formation patterns mathematically impossible under known physics models. Day 53. Thermal imaging caught something moving inside the glacier. Not water flow, geometric, deliberate, equipment malfunction. Running diagnostics again tomorrow. Day 61. Indigenous histories mention entities that swim through solid ice. Thought it was metaphorical. Not so sure now. His final entry was just 3 days before he vanished. They know I'm watching them now. The cold has eyes. During my second week, the strangeness began. First, it was just equipment readings, temperature sensors showing impossible fluctuations, dropping 30 degrees in localized spots for exactly 86 seconds before returning to normal. I checked and recalibrated twice, thinking it was equipment failure. Then I found the patterns, delicate frost formations appearing on the inside of my laboratory window each morning. Not random crystals, but precise geometric shapes. Hexagons within hexagons, fractal patterns that couldn't form naturally. I photographed them before they melted, comparing them day by day. They were growing more complex, like something learning. To write. You've noticed them too, Abigail said, catching me documenting the patterns on my 17th morning. She didn't seem surprised. They started a few days before Michael went missing. At exactly midnight during my 3rd week, every communication device in the station experienced interference. Static bursts lasting precisely 3 minutes. Jensen blamed solar activity, but the pattern repeated regardless of atmospheric conditions. Began examining my brother's ice core samples stored in the station's freezer. The anomalies were immediately obvious to trained eyes. Crystal structures that grew in impossible directions, tiny bubbles arranged in sequences that resembled code. When I ran composition tests, the computer repeatedly returned errors, as if the samples contained elements it couldn't identify. "What did you find out there, Michael?" I whispered to the gleaming core. On day 23, I ventured onto the frozen lake for my own samples. The temperature was -32, cold enough that my breath froze instantly, falling like snow from my respirator. As I drilled through the ice, I saw it, a shimmer of light moving beneath the surface, too fast and too purposeful to be. A fish. It pulsed with a blue-white glow before disappearing deeper. That night, the station's historical records kept me awake until dawn. Coldridge wasn't just any research outpost. It was built in 1937, and every decade since, people had vanished during winter lockdown. The official explanations varied: blizzards, equipment accidents, mental breakdowns leading to suicide. But the pattern was undeniable, and each disappearance was preceded by equipment malfunctions and temperature anomalies. By the end of my first month, I couldn't ignore the growing dread. Gregory Hayes reported seeing someone walking on the frozen lake during his morning observations, but all personnel were accounted for inside the station. Samantha's aquatic monitors kept recording massive movement under the ice, where nothing should be able to survive. And I began hearing it, the impossible sound of moving water behind solid walls, like something swimming through the very structure of the building. My grandmother called them the cold that hunts, Abigail told me, as we huddled in the storage room, away from the others. Beings older than humans, who live in the space between water and ice. They take people who notice them. "Why didn't you tell Michael this?" I asked, my voice breaking. Her eyes met mine. "I did. That's why he went looking for them." Later that night, as temperatures plunged to record lows and the structure of the station creaked under the extreme cold, I finally decoded one of Michael's encrypted research files. The video showed the frozen lake surface at night, filmed a week before he vanished. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then the ice began to bulge upward, forming a human-shaped outline that stood on the surface for exactly 12 seconds before melting back into perfect smoothness. His voice, shaking with a mix of terror and scientific excitement, came through clearly. "They're not in the ice. They're not under it. The ice itself is alive." The emergency conservation protocols kicked in as our generator struggled against the cold. Lights dimmed, heat concentrated in core areas only. In that darkness I heard it again, the liquid sound of something moving through solid matter, growing closer to my door. I wasn't just following Michael's footsteps anymore. I was being followed too. And somehow I knew the cold had been waiting. For me all along. I woke to screams echoing through the station. For a moment I thought I was dreaming, the kind of nightmare where you can't move, can't breathe, can only listen as danger comes closer. But the emergency lights flashing red in my small room were real. The voice on the intercom, tight with panic, was real. "Medical emergency in Lab 3. Anyone with first aid training now." I threw on clothes and ran. The station's narrow hallways felt colder than they should, even with the heating system running. My breath came out in visible puffs. This wasn't right. Indoor temperatures were strictly controlled. When I reached Lab 3, I found Kozlov and Gregory already there. Samantha Miles lay on the floor. Her body was frozen solid. Not like someone who died in the cold and was covered in frost. This was different. She looked like a statue made of ice, her eyes open in terror, one hand reaching upward. "This isn't possible," Gregory whispered. "She was alive an hour ago." Kozlov's face had gone white. "Get Jensen. Tell him to radio for emergency evacuation." I knelt beside Samantha, my scientific mind trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Her lab coat wasn't frozen to her body. It was loose, like she'd been flash frozen so quickly that the fabric didn't have time to stick. And there was something else, something worse. Tiny ice crystals were visible under her skin, as if she'd frozen from the inside out. The door was locked from the inside, Kozlov said. We had to break it down. I looked around the lab. Nothing was disturbed. The computer still hummed, showing Samantha's interrupted work. Analysis of local water samples. On the screen was an image that made my heart stop. A microscopic view of water molecules, arranging themselves in a pattern identical to the frost formations on my window. That afternoon, I recalibrated my equipment to scan for what Michael had called non-standard matter. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I programmed the sensors to flag anything that didn't match known elements or compounds. Within an hour, alerts started chiming. The readouts showed something impossible. Patches of matter throughout. The station that registered as neither solid nor liquid, existing somehow in between states. These patches moved, flowing through walls as easily as water flows through fingers. That night, the power went out in my lab while I was reviewing the data. Then in the kitchen, then the living quarters. Not a complete blackout, selective failures. That followed no logical pattern. Something's targeting specific systems, Abigail said, as she tried to restore power to the communications room. This isn't mechanical failure. It's too precise. I helped her with the repairs, and as we worked, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. What happened to the other people who disappeared here? Abigail's hand stilled on the wiring. The official reports say they wandered outside during storms. But, she lowered her voice, my great-uncle was part of the original survey team in the 1930s. He told my grandmother that they found things in the ice. Not bodies, copies, perfect ice sculptures of missing people down to the smallest detail. A memory flashed in my mind. Michael's video of the human shape rising from the ice. As if reading my thoughts, Abigail added, the legends say they make these copies to learn about us, to understand how we're made before they try to make themselves. Like us. That night a blizzard hit with sudden fury. The wind screamed around the station like a living thing, and temperatures dropped to -60. Through my small window, I could see only swirling white, but twice I thought I saw human shapes moving through the storm, translucent figures that seemed to form and dissolve. The next morning, Gregory Hayes didn't show up for breakfast. His room was empty, his bed made. His heavy outdoor gear still hung on its hook, his boots still in place. Outside, fresh snow showed no footprints. It was as if he'd simply vanished or been taken. We need to check the security cameras, I insisted. Kozlov seemed reluctant, but couldn't refuse with a person missing. The footage showed Gregory walking, normally down the hallway toward the equipment room at 2:17 a.m. He passed under a camera, and then the image flickered. When it cleared, the hallway was empty. His clothes lay in a neat pile on the floor, as if he'd melted out of them. While the others argued about what to do, I slipped away to continue my research. Gregory's disappearance matched the pattern in Michael's notes exactly. The night after a temperature anomaly, always during peak darkness hours. Abigail found me in the lab later that day. There's something you need to see, she whispered. Something not on the official station blueprints. She led me to the supply closet near the boiler room. Hidden behind shelving was a small access hatch I'd never noticed before. Abigail entered a code on a hidden keypad, and the hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a metal ladder descending into darkness. How did you find this? I asked. Your brother showed me? She handed me a flashlight. Before he disappeared, he said if anything happened to him, I should show you what's down there. The ladder led to a sub-level that didn't appear on any station schematics. A large room filled with filing cabinets, old computer equipment, and glass sample containers. The air was even colder here. Preserved documents dating back to the 1930s lined the walls. This station wasn't built for general research, Abigail said. It was built specifically to study what lives in the ice. I opened a file cabinet labeled incident reports, and found folder after folder of disappearances, not just the ones I'd found in the official records, but dozens more going back decades. Each report included witness accounts of ice anomalies and phase-shifting events before people vanished. On a shelf, I found a container labeled Wells M. Personal Effects. Inside was Michael's journal, not the official one I'd been given, but his real notes. The final pages detailed his plan to make contact with what he called the ice entities, beings he believed existed in a quantum state between our world and another dimension. "I've mapped their movements," he'd written. "They follow patterns, mathematical sequences. They're trying to communicate. I'm going to answer." As I read his words, the lights flickered. The temperature in the hidden room plummeted so quickly that the metal shelving cracked. And I heard it again, that impossible liquid sound coming from inside the solid walls. "We need to go," Abigail whispered. "Now." We barely made it back to the main level before the entire station was plunged into darkness. Emergency power kicked, embathing everything in dim red light. Over the intercom, Kozlov's voice was tight with control. "All personnel to the common room. Immediately. Storm protocols in effect." The worst blizzard in the station's history had descended on us. Winds over 100 miles per hour battered the buildings, and the temperature had dropped to 70 below zero. We were completely cut off. No radio contact, no possibility of evacuation. But the real danger wasn't the storm. As we gathered in the common room, Jensen pointed to the ice forming on the inside of the reinforced windows. "That's not condensation," he said. "The walls are frozen solid, but this ice is growing from the inside." I watched in horror as the ice crystals spread across the glass, forming those now familiar geometric patterns. But this time, they didn't stop. They kept growing, branching out, taking shape, becoming a hand pressed against the glass from our side. Kozlov finally broke. "We need to tell you the truth," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm, "about why this station exists, about what happened to your brother." Before he could continue, the lights went out completely. In the pitch darkness, I felt rather, then saw something move past me, something cold enough to lower the temperature of the air it passed through. And then, by the faint light of our emergency flashlights, we saw it. Standing in the center of the room was a human figure made entirely of translucent ice. Inside its chest, suspended in the frozen material, was what looked like a human heart. "Jensen!" screamed. I couldn't move, because despite its featureless face, I recognized the way it stood, the shape of its shoulders. It was Michael, and as we watched, frozen in terror, it raised one crystalline hand and pointed directly at me. No one moved, no one breathed. The ice figure that looked like my brother stood perfectly still in the center of the room, arm extended toward me. Then Kozlov broke the silence. "Don't run," he whispered. "Quick movements attract them." "Them?" Jensen's voice shook. As if answering, two more figures formed from the walls themselves, the ice melting inward, reshaping into human forms. One was clearly Gregory, his features perfectly captured in transparent ice. The other I didn't recognize, perhaps someone from a previous team. "What are they?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. The Michael thing tilted its head like it was listening. Then it moved, not walking but flowing across the floor, stopping just feet from me. Up close, I could see that what I thought was a heart inside it wasn't quite right. It was something else, a swirling mass of what looked like liquid suspended. Inside the ice, pulsing with faint light. "They're called the Ithaqua in the old stories," Abigail said, her voice calm despite her fear. "Beings that exist between states, not fully in our world. We've been studying them for decades," Kozlov admitted. "They only appear during the coldest periods, when the barrier between our world and theirs thins." The ice Michael raised its hand again, pressing it against the wall. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees instantly. Ice began forming patterns on every surface. Not random frost, but symbols, lines, curves. It's trying to communicate, I realized. Back, in my lab, with the others following nervously, I connected my equipment, the specialized thermal imaging cameras and sensors I'd brought to track ice movements. The entities followed, moving through walls as easily as we moved through air. On my screens, I could see what the naked eye couldn't. They existed primarily as energy patterns, only partially manifesting physically. They're not fully solid, I explained, my scientific mind working despite my fear. They exist in quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and liquid. Why do they look like people who disappeared? Jensen demanded, keeping his distance from the figures. I adjusted my equipment, capturing more detailed readings. They're not copying people, I said, as understanding dawned. They're preserving them. The data confirmed it. The swirling mass inside each ice figure contained organic matter, human cell patterns, not just imprints or copies, but actual consciousness somehow suspended between states of matter. They think they're saving us, I whispered. The Michael thing moved closer to my equipment, seeming to study it. Then it placed its hand directly on the thermal sensor. The computer screen filled with rapidly changing temperature patterns. Cold, spots moving in precise sequences. It's binary code, Abigail realized, watching over my shoulder. Cold and colder instead of ones and zeros. I quickly wrote a program to translate the temperature variations into text. The message that appeared sent chills through me that had nothing to do with the freezing room. We remember you, Eleanor. We know you through him, Michael, I whispered. You can access his memories? Another temperature pattern. He is here with us. He showed us how to speak. What are you? I typed the question into my program, which converted it to temperature instructions sent through the sensor. The answer came slowly. First ones, before ice, before cold, pushed into between when you came. They were here before humans, Kozlov said, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his fear. Early human migration must have disrupted their environment somehow. I had another question. What do you want? Balance broken, too warm, now need cold, need energy to survive. The pieces fell into place. They feed on thermal energy, I said. As the planet warms, they're losing their habitat. They're taking people to preserve them somehow, to use their thermal energy to survive. Kozlov's face darkened. That's why the government built this station, not just to study them, to weaponize them. Imagine soldiers who could phase through solid matter or weapons that could freeze enemies from the inside out. The ice figures seemed agitated now, moving more quickly around the room. The temperature dropped so low that our breath crystallized instantly, falling like snow. We need to establish proper communication, I insisted. Michael was right, they're intelligent. We can negotiate. Over the next few hours, we worked frantically to build a more sophisticated communication system. I used my ice-penetrating radar, modifying it to send and receive temperature variations more precisely. Abigail helped adapt the station's thermal regulators to create controlled hot and cold zones. My grandmother's people had rituals, she explained as we worked, ways to communicate with the between-world beings. They left offerings at specific spots where the worlds were thin. As the storm raged outside, cutting us off from all hope of rescue, we learned more about the entities. They had existed for thousands of years, primarily in the dimensional space between states of matter. Global warming was slowly killing them, forcing them to become more solid, more desperate. They don't understand that they're hurting us, I realized. To them, they're saving people, preserving them in a state between life and death. Through my jerry-rigged communication system, I asked about Michael. Where is my brother now? The answer chilled me. With us between not dead, not alive, showed us how to bridge. I pressed, Can he come back? The longest pause yet. Then, no, but you can speak. The lights flickered, and the ice figure that had been Michael seemed to shimmer. Its features became more defined, more human, and then I heard his voice. Not with my ears, but somehow directly in my mind. Ellie, you came. The voice was distant, echoing, but unmistakably Michael. How is this possible? I whispered. They preserve consciousness, Michael's voice explained. They don't understand that we see it as death. To them, it's evolution, transcending physical form. Can we help them without more people dying? I asked. Before he could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. The temperature control systems were failing catastrophically. On the screens, I could see why. Dozens of ice entities were now materializing throughout the station, drawn by the extreme cold of the storm. They're coming through en masse, Kozlov shouted over the alarms. The cold snap has thinned the dimensional barrier. Jensen and Kozlov ran to the control room to try to restore the heating systems. I heard Jensen's scream cut short, then silence. When we reached the control room, there was nothing left of him but clothes on the floor and a new ice figure forming in the corner. We need to get to the geothermal controls, Abigail said urgently. If we can create a heat barrier, we fought our way through increasingly cold corridors. Ice entities moved through the walls around us, some fully formed, others just partially. Materializing, hands reaching out, faces pressing through solid surfaces. The station was becoming their world. In the sublevel, I found what I was looking for. Michael's prototype device, designed to modify dimensional vibrations using thermal energy. His notes explained his theory: create a permanent passage between our world and theirs, allowing them to exist without needing to take human thermal energy. This was his plan all along, I realized. Not to stop them, but to help them. As Abigail worked on the geothermal controls, creating heat barriers to hold back the entities, I modified Michael's device, following his notes. The entities watched, but didn't interfere, as if they understood what I was attempting. It needs a power source, I said, looking at the completed device. Something to jump-start the process. Body heat. Michael's voice came again, the ice figure moving closer. That's what I was planning to use, thermal energy from a living human freely given. I understood then. The entities weren't evil, they were desperate, dying. And Michael had found a way to help them survive without taking more lives. But the cost was high. There's no other way, I asked. The passage needs to be created from both sides, he explained. I'm already here, but someone needs to complete it from your side. The station shuddered as the blizzard intensified. The walls around us were now sheets of ice, entities moving within them like fish in water. We were running out of time. I'll do it, I said. Tell me how. The process was simple but terrifying. I would connect myself to the device, allowing it to channel my body's thermal energy to create a stable passage between dimensions. In theory, the entities could then exist partially in their world and partially in ours, without needing to take more people. You'll become like me, Michael warned. Not dead, but not alive either, a guardian between worlds. Abigail tried to stop me, but I had made my decision. As the entities gathered around us, I activated the device and placed my hands on the conductive plates. The cold that flowed into me wasn't painful. It was peaceful, like sinking into sleep. I felt my body temperature dropping rapidly, ice crystals forming under my skin. But my mind remained clear, expanding somehow, seeing both worlds at once. I could feel them now, thousands of ancient consciousnesses existing in the space between. Matter. I could feel Michael among them, guiding me, and I understood what they needed. Not our lives, but balance, a way to exist alongside us in a warming world. The device hummed, drawing energy from me, creating a permanent bridge. Around us, the ice entities began to change, becoming less solid, more like shimmering energy patterns. They no longer needed physical forms to survive. As my consciousness expanded beyond my freezing body, I sent one final message through the communication system to Abigail. Tell them we found balance. 3 years later, a new research team arrived at Coldridge Station, now rebuilt and expanded. They came to study unusual ice formations and energy patterns that had been detected in the region. In the lowest level, preserved exactly as it had been found, they maintained Eleanor Wells' body, perfectly preserved in clear ice, her expression peaceful, her hand still resting on the strange device she had built. The lead scientist approached the case cautiously. The reports say this area experiences unusual temperature variations, she told her team, patterns that seem almost like code. As if responding to her words, frost began forming on the inside of the case, perfect geometric patterns like someone writing a message. The scientist leaned closer, fascinated rather than afraid. "Hello?" she whispered, and in the space between the ice crystals, for just a moment she thought she saw a woman's face smiling back at her. But perhaps it was just a trick of the light. Outside, snow began to fall as temperatures dropped, and something moved through the solid walls watching. The day I first drove up to my grandfather's cabin, I should have turned around when my phone lost signal. But I didn't. I kept driving, following the worn-out map he'd left me, watching the trees grow taller and darker until they blocked out most of the sun. I was running away from my own mess anyway. What was one more bad decision? You've probably seen my name in the papers by now. Vincent Maxwell, the guy who faked those war photos. The one who lost his Pulitzer Prize and his job at the biggest newspaper in New York. Yeah, that's me. But this story isn't about that scandal. It's about something much stranger, something I still have trouble believing, even though I lived through. Indeed, the last mile to the cabin wasn't even a road, just a narrow dirt path through towering evergreens that seemed to watch me as I hiked up with my camera gear. My fancy equipment looked ridiculous out here. Thousands of dollars worth of lenses and bodies bouncing against my chest as I stumbled over roots and rocks. The cabin itself was exactly what you'd expect. All weathered wood and crooked windows, with a tin roof that had seen better days. But it was mine now, left to me by my grandfather, who I barely knew. The key was right where his lawyer said it would be, under a fake rock that looked more fake than any fake rock had a right to look. Inside, the place smelled like old wood and something else I couldn't quite place. Dust covered everything except, strangely, a stack of leather-bound journals on the kitchen table. I picked one up, and a slip of paper fell out. My grandfather's handwriting, sharp and urgent, to Vincent. Some things need watching. Some things need protecting. The camera sees what eyes can't. I laughed then. My grandfather must have known about my photography, but he couldn't have known how badly I'd messed that up. Still, I was here to start over, to do something honest. For once, I planned to document the old-growth forest, show people why it needed saving. Simple, right? The general store was my first stop the next morning. Needed supplies if I was going to live like a hermit. The owner, Lillian Garrett, was rearranging cans when I walked in. She was probably in her 60s, with grey hair tied back in a neat braid. "Maxwell," she said when I introduced myself. Just that one word, and suddenly the friendly smile vanished from her face. Thomas's grandson. "You knew my grandfather." She turned away, busying herself with the cans again. Everyone knew Thomas. He had responsibilities. That was weird. But I was getting used to weird. Back at the cabin, I started setting up my equipment, placing trail cameras in what I thought were good spots to catch wildlife. The forest felt different now, deeper somehow, more alive. Every snapping twig made me jump. It wasn't until I found the cellar that things got really strange. The door was hidden under an old rug, reinforced with more locks than any cellar door should have. Inside, steel shelves lined the walls, holding jars of plants I'd never seen before, and equipment that looked military grade. In one corner, a table held what looked like hair samples, each carefully labeled with dates going back decades. That night, I sat at the kitchen table reading my grandfather's journals. Most of it was normal enough. Observations about weather, wildlife, the changing seasons. But scattered throughout were sections written in some kind of code, letters and numbers that made no sense. As I was about to close the last journal, a photo slipped out. It showed this same cabin, taken maybe 50 years ago, but in the background, half hidden in the trees, was something that made my blood run cold. Something tall, much too tall to be human, watching the cabin with eyes that seemed to glow in the flash. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, just shadows and an overactive imagination. But as I got ready for bed that first night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out in those dark woods was watching me through the windows. Something that had been waiting for a Maxwell to return. I didn't know it then, but that was just the beginning. And what happened next? Well, that's where things get really weird. I spent the next few days setting up my photography routine. Wake up early, check the trail cameras, then hike deeper into the forest looking for good spots to capture the morning light. Everything seemed normal at first, almost peaceful. But then the photos started showing things I couldn't explain. It began with a simple sunset shot. I was developing the pictures in the makeshift darkroom I'd set up in the bathroom when I noticed it. A strange glow between the trees that hadn't been there when I took the picture. Not lens flare, not a light. Like something else, something that moved between frames. I told myself I was imagining things. But then more weird stuff started happening. One morning I found clumps of hair caught in the fence behind the cabin. Not deer hair, not bear hair, nothing I recognized. It was long and coarse, almost human-looking, but different somehow. I put it in a plastic bag, just like the samples I'd found in the cellar. That's when I met Dakota Wilson. He was a local hunter who'd stopped by the general store while I was buying supplies. Built like a tree trunk, with a beard that hadn't seen scissors in years. When I mentioned the strange things I'd been seeing in my photos, he got real quiet. "You've been seeing the Dark Watchers, haven't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The what?" "Things that live in the deep woods. Things that can get inside your head." He tapped his temple. "Your grandpa knew about them. Everyone around here knows, but we don't talk about it. Bad things happen when people talk too much." I laughed it off then, but that night something woke me up at 3 a.m. A sound like footsteps, but not quite right. Too heavy, too spread out. When I looked out the window, I saw something that made my heart stop. The trees at the edge of the clearing were moving, but there was no wind. The next day, I found strange patterns of stones by the creek. Not random, definitely placed there on purpose. They looked like the symbols I'd seen in my grandfather's journal, the ones in code. I took pictures, of course. That's what I do. But when I developed them, the stones looked different in the photos, like they were glowing from within. My digital cameras started acting weird too. They'd work fine near the cabin, but take them deep into the forest and they'd just die. No battery warning, no error message, just dead. But my old film cameras, they worked perfectly, like something out there only messed with modern technology. Then the dreams started. I'd find myself moving through the forest at night, but not on two legs. My viewpoint was wrong, too high up, maybe 8 or 9 feet off the ground. And I could feel the trees. Not just see them or touch them, but feel them like they were part of me. I'd wake up with mud on my feet and no memory of leaving the cabin. One day I found it. My grandfather's real photography room. It was hidden behind a false wall in the cellar. Thousands of photographs, all carefully labeled and dated. And in every single one of them, once you knew what to look for, you could see them. Massive shapes in the shadows, eyes reflecting light that shouldn't have been there, faces that weren't quite faces. I was still trying to process what I'd found when there was a knock at my door. 2 police officers looking worried. They showed me pictures of missing hikers, not just recent ones, but cases going back 50 years. All disappeared in these woods, all last seen near Darkwater Creek. That's when I started really digging into my grandfather's journals. The coded parts weren't random. They were records, dates, locations, and something else. Something about an arrangement that had to be maintained. A deal made by my great-grandfather, passed down through the family. I was about to find out exactly what that deal was. But first, I had to survive what happened in the Cedar Grove. Looking back now, I wish I'd never gone there. But then again, I didn't really have a choice. The forest had already chosen me, just like it had chosen my grandfather, and the forest, I was learning, always gets what it wants. The Cedar Grove changed everything. I'd seen it marked in my grandfather's journals, a circle of ancient trees deeper in the forest than I usually went. I picked a calm morning to hike out there, carrying my old film camera. The trees were huge, their trunks wider than my car, branches reaching up so high they seemed to touch the clouds. I was setting up my tripod when it happened. The feeling hit me like a wave. Suddenly I wasn't alone in my own head anymore. It felt like someone had opened a door in my mind, and thoughts that weren't mine came flooding in. Not words exactly, more like feelings and pictures. The forest was in my head, and it had something to show me. I saw everything at once. The trees weren't just trees, they were like giant antennas, connecting everything in the forest. And the Sasquatch, because that's what they really were. They weren't just animals. They were more like guardians, watching over something ancient and powerful. When I could think straight again, I was sitting on the ground, my camera forgotten beside me. That's when I saw it, standing just inside the tree line. It was huge, at least 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur, but its eyes were intelligent, aware, and they were looking right at me. I should have been terrified, but somehow I wasn't. Maybe because I could still feel its thoughts, calm and curious, wondering about me just like I was wondering about it. It felt like meeting a relative I didn't know I had. Then we both heard the trucks. The logging company had sent a survey team to mark trees at the edge of my property. I watched from behind a tree as they worked, hammering metal tags into the bark. But I wasn't the only one watching. Through that strange new connection in my mind, I could feel the forest's reaction: anger, fear, purpose. That night, 2 of the surveyors disappeared. Their equipment was found the next morning, arranged in a perfect circle like the stone patterns I'd seen before. The police came back asking questions. I wanted to tell them what I knew, but how could I explain? "Sorry, officer, but the forest took them because they threatened the wrong trees." I started losing time after that. I'd find myself in strange parts of the forest with no memory of how I got there. The psychic connections were getting stronger, harder to block out. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of the missing surveyors through their eyes. They were alive, but changed somehow, like the forest was keeping them in a kind of suspended animation. Back at the cabin, I finally managed to decode more of my grandfather's journal. What I read made my hands shake. Our family hadn't just inherited this land, we'd been chosen to protect it. The forest was alive, really alive, in a way science couldn't explain. And the Sasquatch weren't just random creatures, they were its hands and eyes, created to guard something older than humans. My grandfather wrote about a network of roots and fungus running through the whole forest, connecting everything like a giant brain. The Sasquatch could tap into this network, using it to move through space and time in ways that shouldn't be possible. That explained the missing people showing up decades later, looking exactly the same. But the most shocking part, the Maxwells weren't just observers. We were part of it too. Something in our blood, passed down through generations, let us connect with the forest consciousness. That's why I could hear their thoughts. That's why the forest had called me here. One night I woke up to find one of them in my cabin. Not one of the big adults I'd seen before. This one was younger, maybe 7 feet tall, with curious eyes. It was looking at my photographs spread out on the table. When it noticed me, watching, it didn't run. Instead, it reached out, not with its hand, but with its mind. The connection was stronger this time, clearer. Through its eyes, I saw the truth about everything. The Sasquatch hadn't evolved alongside humans like scientists thought. They were here first, created by the forest itself as guardians. And now something was coming that threatened everything they'd protected for millennia. I saw bulldozers and chainsaws. I saw men with guns and scientific equipment. I saw myself standing between the forest and destruction. The young Sasquatch was showing me the future, a future I had to prevent. As it left through my front door, which should have been locked, it turned back to look at me one last time. In my mind, I heard words as clear as day. You are your grandfather now. The forest needs you. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. How could I? I finally understood what my inheritance really meant. This wasn't just land. This wasn't just a cabin. This was a responsibility passed down through blood and time. And I was running out of time to figure out how to handle it. Because the next morning, I heard more trucks coming up the logging road. But this time, they weren't just bringing surveyors. They were bringing an army. They came at dawn. 5 huge trucks loaded with logging equipment, followed by black SUVs with tinted windows. I counted at least 20 men, some wearing logging company uniforms, others in tactical gear with guns that definitely weren't meant for hunting. A woman in a business suit stepped out of the lead SUV. She walked right up to my cabin like she owned the place, her heels somehow not sinking into the mud. "Mr. Maxwell," she said, holding out her hand. "I'm Allison Montgomery from Northwest Timber. We should talk." I didn't shake her hand. "There's nothing to talk about. This land isn't for sale." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We know what's out here, Mr. Maxwell. Your grandfather's photographs were interesting, but did you know he was sending copies to someone? Someone who found them very valuable?" My stomach dropped. All those carefully documented photos, all that coded information. My grandfather had been keeping records, all right, but not just for himself. "We've been studying these creatures for years," Allison continued. "Think about it. Their ability to manipulate space and time, their connection to the forest network, the military applications alone." She pulled out a check. "Name your price." Through my new connection to the forest, I could feel the Sasquatch watching us. They were angry, but also scared. These people knew about them, had been hunting them, and now they'd brought an army. "Get off my land," I said. She sighed. "We were afraid you'd be difficult about this, just like your grandfather." She nodded to one of the men in tactical gear. "Show him what we found in the old growth section." The man opened a laptop. On the screen was thermal camera. New footage, massive shapes moving through the trees. But it wasn't just the Sasquatch. I saw other things too. Things that were part human, part tree. Living things suspended in the ancient trunks, their faces peaceful like they were sleeping. "The missing people," I whispered. "Not missing," Allison said. "Transformed. The forest doesn't just take, Mr. Maxwell. It changes, adapts, evolves. And we want to know how." That's when I noticed some of her men setting up strange equipment around the clearing. Metal rods that hummed with electricity, pointing at the trees. They were using my grandfather's research, my own photographs, to build weapons against the forest. I tried to warn them, told them about the connection between the trees, about the consciousness that lived in the roots. But Allison just smiled. "Again, we're counting on it," she said. "The chainsaws started up at noon. They began with the younger trees at the forest's edge. But I could feel the pain through my connection to the network. Each cut was like a knife in my own flesh. And deep, in the woods, something was waking up. I ran to the cellar, desperate to find anything in my grandfather's notes that could help. That's when I found the last journal, hidden behind a loose brick. Inside was a ritual passed down through generations of Maxwell's, a way to merge completely with the forest consciousness. 7 of my ancestors had done it before, becoming part of the Guardian network. But there was a price. Once you joined with the forest, you couldn't go back. You'd never be human again. As I read, the ground began to shake. Through the cellar window, I saw trees moving by themselves, roots rising from the ground like giant snakes. The Sasquatch emerged from the shadows, no longer hiding. But they looked different now. Their bodies shifting, changing, becoming one. With the trees, one of Allison's men fired some kind of sonic weapon. The sound cut through my head like a blade, and I felt the forest scream. The pain dropped me to my knees. Through my mental connection, I saw one of the Sasquatch fall, its body flickering like a bad TV signal. They were going to capture them, study them, turn the forest's own power into a weapon. Unless I looked at my grandfather's journal again. The ritual was simple, really, almost too simple. All it needed was a willing sacrifice at the point where Darkwater Creek split into 3 branches, a place where the forest's power ran strongest. Outside, the battle was getting worse. Allison's men had some kind of electric net that could actually hold a Sasquatch. The trees were fighting back, but the sonic weapons were keeping them confused, breaking their connection to the network. I had to make a choice, run away again, like I did when my career fell apart, or stay and become something else, something more than human. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. The forest had chosen me long ago, just like it chose my grandfather and his father before him. I grabbed the journal and ran toward the creek, the sound of chainsaws and screaming trees following me into the darkness. I ran through the darkness, my grandfather's journal clutched to my chest. Behind me, the sounds of chaos grew louder, crashing trees, strange electronic whines from the weapons, and something else, something like singing, but deeper than any human voice could go. The creek intersection wasn't far. I'd photographed it dozens of times, 3 branches of water coming together in a perfect Y shape. But tonight it looked different. The water seemed to glow from within, like it had captured all the starlight from above. I heard trucks crashing through the underbrush behind me. They were following. Of course they were. They'd probably been watching this spot, knowing what it meant. My hands shook as I opened the journal to the ritual page. The instructions were written in my grandfather's handwriting, but somehow I already knew what to do. The forest was in my head now, guiding me. I stepped into the creek where the 3 branches met, the glowing water swirling around my legs. That's when I saw her, a vigor standing in the trees, watching me. She looked like she was made of bark and moonlight, her hair moving like leaves in a wind I couldn't feel. I recognized her face from old family photos. "Grandma?" I whispered. She smiled, not with her mouth, but with her whole being. Through our mental connection, I felt her joy at seeing me, her sadness at what I had to do, and her absolute certainty that this was right. "The forest remembers," she said, her voice like rustling leaves. "It remembers everything." Suddenly, images flooded my mind. I saw my grandfather performing this same ritual decades ago, joining his consciousness with the forest, but keeping enough of himself to maintain the cabin, to keep up appearances. I saw others before him, each, Maxwell, adding their strength to the network. The trucks were getting closer. Flashlight beams cut through the trees. I heard Allison shouting orders. I looked down at the water around my legs. It was rising, or maybe I was sinking. I couldn't tell anymore. The glow had started moving up my body, following my veins like I had starlight instead of blood. "It's not too late to make a deal," Allison's voice closer now. "Think about what we could learn," but it was too late. I wasn't just Vincent Maxwell anymore. I was every Maxwell who had stood in this spot. I was every tree my grandfather had photographed. I was the creek itself, flowing endlessly in 3 directions at once. Transformation didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt like waking up from a dream where I'd thought I was small and separate. Now I was everything, every root, every branch, every shadow between the trees. I felt the Sasquatch merge with me, their minds joining the vast network that pulsed. Beneath the ground, through a million eyes, I watched Allison's men reach the clearing. Through a million minds, I felt their fear when they saw what was happening. The water around my body, my old body, had turned to pure light. The trees were bending inward, their branches weaving together like fingers. I spoke with the voice of the forest itself. This place is protected. The sonic weapons didn't work anymore. How can you attack something that's everywhere? The electric nets couldn't hold what had become like mist and shadow. One by one, the trucks died, their engines filled with rapidly growing vines. Allison stood her ground longer than the others. She watched as her men ran, as the forest reclaimed its space. She watched as my human form dissolved into pure energy, feeding the network that sustained this ancient place. "What are you?" she whispered. "We are the forest," we answered. We are its memory, its guardians, its conscience, and you will tell others what you saw here. You will tell them that some places must remain wild, some powers must remain free. She ran then, following her men back to the road. We let them go. The forest doesn't need revenge, it needs respect. Fear can teach that, sometimes better than violence. Time moves differently for me now. I am the shadows between trees and the dreams of sleeping birds. I am the force that guides lost hikers back to safe paths and the whisper that warns loggers away from sacred groves. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I visit my old cabin, watching through the windows as a new family lives there. They're Maxwells too, distant cousins who felt the call of the forest. Their youngest daughter takes pictures of the trees, just like I used to. Sometimes she catches glimpses of things in her photos, tall shapes in the shadows, eyes that glow like starlight. She doesn't know it yet, but she's starting to feel the connection. One day she might stand where I stood, at the place where three waters meet. And if that day comes, I'll be there to welcome her home. Because that's what the forest really is. A home for everything that needs protecting. Everything that needs to stay wild and free. Everything that reminds us that some mysteries shouldn't be solved, only guarded. I am the forest now, and the forest remembers everything. The day I buried my mother, I found her suicide note. Not the one the police discovered, a different one hidden in her favorite book. The answers are in the dreams, Josie. Go to the station, finish what I started. That's how I ended up here, driving through the endless Arizona desert toward a research facility nobody wanted to talk about. Mom had been a brilliant anthropologist, but in her final years, people whispered she'd gone crazy studying ancient rock carvings. Now here I was, following her footsteps, hoping to understand why she'd taken her life. The research station appeared suddenly, a cluster of low buildings surrounded by towering red rock formations. The structures looked almost abandoned, windows reflecting the harsh sunlight like blind eyes. My car kicked up clouds of rust-colored dust as I pulled to a stop. I sat there for a moment, hands tight on the steering wheel. The silence out here was complete. No birds, no insects, just the soft tick of my car's cooling engine. Something about this place felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. "You must be Dr. Harlow." I jumped at the voice. A tall Native American man stood beside my car, his face unreadable. "Thomas Begay," he said as I climbed out. "I'm your local liaison." His handshake was brief, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "I've turned on the generator and checked the water system. There's enough supplies to last a month." "Thank you. I appreciate the help," I said, stretching after the long drive. Thomas nodded stiffly. "Call if you need anything. Signal's spotty, but it works." He hesitated, then added, "Your mother's things. They're all still there. Nobody's touched anything since everyone left," I finished for him. "Since they evacuated," he corrected. something flickering across his face. 3 years ago. Do you know why they left so suddenly? Thomas looked past me at the red rocks. Government orders. That's all I know. His tone made it clear he didn't want to say more. The interior of the main building was frozen in time. Coffee mugs still sat on desks. Papers were scattered as if their owners had simply vanished mid-task. A fine layer of red dust covered everything. My mother's office was worst of all. Her reading glasses perched on a stack of notebooks. A half-drunk cup of tea, now just dust in a ceramic mug. And everywhere, photos and drawings of petroglyphs, the ancient rock carvings she'd devoted her life to studying. I ran my fingers across her desk, leaving trails in the dust. "What happened here, Mom?" I whispered. That night I unpacked my own research materials. As a cultural anthropologist specializing in dream symbolism, I'd brought everything I needed to continue my mother's work. Whatever she'd been studying about these rock carvings and their connection to dreaming, I was determined to figure it out. Morning routine developed quickly. Wake at dawn, conserve water with quick showers, document everything. The desert heat became unbearable by noon, forcing me to work inside during peak hours. Each evening I explored the facility's extensive archives, decades of petroglyph records, most collected by my mother. On my 4th day, while sorting through files, I found a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Dr. Harlow, Grace Tsosi, called. Again, says she needs to speak with you urgently. The next morning, I drove into the nearest town, little more than a crossroads with a gas station and small market. The woman behind the counter pointed me toward a small house on the outskirts. Grace Tsosi was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She invited me in without surprise, as if she'd been expecting me. "You look like her," she said, handing me a cup of tea. "Your mother was a good woman, smart, maybe too smart. You knew her well." Grace nodded slowly. "I warned her about the thin places." Thin places, where worlds touch. Her gnarled fingers tapped the table. Where dreaming and waking blur, the old ones knew. That's why they made the drawings on the rocks, to mark the boundaries, to warn us. I leaned forward. The petroglyphs, that's what my mother was studying. Grace's eyes met mine. Not studying, guarding. She reached for my hand. "Listen carefully, child. Dreams are doorways, and some doorways should stay closed." I drove back to the facility with Grace's words echoing in my mind. That night, I dreamed of red dust swirling into shapes that almost made sense, and woke to find perfect geometric patterns formed on my floor. Patterns that shouldn't have been possible in a sealed room. The next day, I discovered the first redacted section in my mother's notes. Entire pages blacked out, folders missing. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the red earth, the lights in the facility flickered despite the steady hum of the generator. Something was happening here. Something my mother had discovered. And whatever it was, it had gotten her killed. I stood at the window, watching coyotes gather in the distance. They stood unnaturally still, all facing the facility, watching, waiting. I needed to know what my mother had found in this place where dreams touch reality. And I was starting to think I wasn't alone here after all. 2 weeks passed and the strangeness grew. I noticed it first with the power, how the lights would dim exactly at sunset, no matter how much fuel the generator had. It wasn't normal flickering. The lights would pulse, almost like they were breathing. One evening, while reviewing Mum's journals, I found pages carefully cut out between entries. The dates jumped from June 3rd to June 17th with no explanation. What had she written that someone wanted gone? Focus on the facts, I told myself, just like Mum had taught me. So I made lists of everything odd. Power issues at sunset, missing journal pages, strange dust patterns appearing overnight, recording equipment turning on by itself. That last one really got to me. I'd set up voice recorders in different rooms, hoping to catch any unusual sounds. Each morning I'd find them activated, despite being unplugged the night before. When I played the recordings back, there was nothing but static, and sometimes what sounded like whispers too faint to make out. I told myself it was just the wind. Then, in came the dreams. In the first one, I stood in a cave, watching the rock carvings move like living things. Animals and stick figures danced across stone walls, telling stories I almost understood. I woke up sweating, heart racing, convinced someone had been in my room. The dream came back night after night, each time with new details. Red dust swirling into shapes, figures walking between the rocks, and always those petroglyphs moving, trying to tell me something. I started finding Mom's research notes about REM phase manifestations and threshold consciousness. Her handwriting grew messier in later entries, like she'd been writing in a hurry or afraid. The symbolism is consistent across cultures separated by time and geography, she'd written. Dream figures that exist in the space between sleeping and waking, guardians or predators, depending on the translation. On my 30th day, Thomas Bigay finally opened up a little. He'd come to deliver supplies and found me mapping petroglyph locations on a large wall chart. My grandfather would not approve of this work, he said quietly. Why not? Thomas hesitated. This place, it sits on forbidden land. Our people avoided these rocks for generations. Because of the petroglyphs? Because of what they keep out. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Your mother asked too many questions. Looked too deeply. Did you know her well? Well enough to respect her. Well enough to fear what she found. He put down the supplies and headed for the door, then stopped. The old stories say some barriers should not be crossed, especially in dreams. That night I couldn't sleep. I found myself digging through old photo archives, comparing pictures of the same petroglyphs taken years apart. At first, I thought I was imagining things, a slight difference in the angle of a line, the position of a figure. But when I overlaid the images digitally, it was unmistakable. The carvings had moved, not by much, millimeters over decades, but they had definitely changed position. As if something on the other side was pushing through, one grain of sandstone at a time. I was still processing this when sleep finally took me. The dream started as usual, the cave, the moving petroglyphs, but this time I wasn't alone. I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, pinned to the bed, though I was standing in the dream. A figure stood in the corner of the room, tall and thin with a human body, but something wrong about the head. It had the features of a coyote, but stretched wrongly over a human skull. It watched me without moving. I tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. When I finally woke up, my throat was raw, as if I'd been screaming for hours. Sunlight streamed through the window. On the floor beside my bed was a perfect ring of red dust. Later that day, I drove to the local library and dug through newspaper archives. 3 times in the past century, people had gone missing in this area, always in groups, always during specific astronomical alignments. The most recent was 3 years ago, right when the facility had been evacuated. Back at the station, I found something else. Mom had installed an elaborate security system, but it wasn't focused on keeping people out. All the cameras pointed inward, at doors, at sleeping areas, like she was watching for something inside. I checked the system and discovered it was still operational, set to record during night hours only. With shaking hands, I reviewed the previous night's footage from my bedroom. The camera showed me sleeping, nothing unusual at first. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the image distorted briefly. When it cleared, there was something standing in the corner, just like in my dream. The figure was blurry, hard to make out, but definitely there. It stood motionless for exactly 6 minutes before the image distorted again. When the picture cleared, my room was empty. I sat back, heart pounding. What had Mom called them in her notes? Those who walk between dreaming. They were real, and somehow they were using dreams to cross over. That night I double-checked every lock, but deep down I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was coming for me wasn't using doors. I set up more cameras and prepared for another sleepless night. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the red rocks outside, I heard something scratching at the walls, like claws trying to get in. Or maybe, I thought with growing dread, like something trying to get out. The scratching sounds kept me awake until dawn. When morning came, I checked the walls but found nothing. No marks, no evidence anything had been there. I was beginning to question my own mind. I called Thomas, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to know what happened here 3 years ago. The real story. A long silence followed. I can't, he finally said. Thomas, please. I think I'm in danger. Another pause. Meet me at the diner in town. 1 hour. But Thomas never showed up. I waited for 3 hours, called repeatedly, and finally drove to his house. His truck was gone, the windows dark. On his front door was a symbol drawn in red clay, a spiral with lines radiating outward, just like one of the petroglyphs. I took a photo and headed back to the facility, my stomach tight with worry. The sun was setting as I arrived, the rocks glowing blood red in the fading light. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. Inside, I found something new. A thin layer of red dust had formed perfect lines across the floor, connecting in geometric patterns that matched certain petroglyphs. I followed them to Mom's lab, where they circled her desk and centered on a floor tile that looked slightly different from the others. I pried it up and found a small metal box. Inside was a leather journal I'd never seen before, much older and more worn than Mom's other notebooks. The first page simply read, "The truth." It was my mother's private journal. Her real findings, hidden from whoever had redacted her official reports. I read for hours, each page more disturbing than the last. "The Dreamwalkers are getting stronger," she'd written. "I can feel them pushing through when I sleep. They know. I'm watching them. They know I'm trying to stop them." The journal detailed her discoveries, how the petroglyphs acted as locks between worlds, how they'd been created by ancient peoples to contain entities that existed primarily in dreams but could manifest physically during certain alignments. "The government team doesn't understand what they're dealing with," she wrote. "They think they can control this, use it. Fools. These entities aren't tools, they're predators." My mother had discovered that the Dreamwalkers needed human minds to cross over, like bridges between worlds. They were especially drawn to certain bloodlines, certain brain patterns, like hers, like mine. I kept reading until a power surge made the lights flare. When they stabilized, I noticed something impossible, a perfect handprint of red dust on the wall opposite me. As I watched, it slowly smeared downward, like someone dragging their hand. There was no one there. I was completely alone. I ran to the security room and checked the cameras. In the hallway footage, dust motes swirled and gathered, forming a vague human shape that moved through the corridor. It passed through a closed door like it wasn't there. That night, I swallowed my fear and did something I'd been avoiding. I hooked myself up to Mum's sleep monitoring equipment. If these entities were contacting me through dreams, I needed to understand how. Sleep came surprisingly easily. In my dream, I stood in the desert under a sky filled with stars arranged in patterns I'd never seen. The red rocks formed a perfect circle around me, and on each surface, petroglyphs glowed with inner light. A figure emerged from between two rocks, human-shaped but wrong somehow, moving like its joints worked differently. It wore a coyote mask, made of wood and bone. "You are her daughter," it said, its voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "You carry her blood, her mind." "What are you?" I asked. "We are the walkers between. We exist in the gap between thought and form." "What do you want?" "To cross over. To exist." It moved closer. Your kind has always been our doorway. I backed. Away. My mother tried to stop you. Your mother understood the truth. The doorway was already open. She merely redirected us. The figure was so close now I could smell it, like dust and sage and something metallic. The alignment comes soon, it whispered. 3 days. When the stars match the stones, we will walk through, unless you finish what she started. I woke, gasping, the monitoring equipment beeping wildly. The data showed something shocking. During REM sleep, my brain patterns exactly matched recordings my mother had made of herself, identical in every way. Outside, the wind had picked up, blowing red dust against the windows. But when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't wind moving the dust. The particles were flowing against the wind, gathering in swirls and patterns. That's when I noticed something else. My arm. The sleeve of my shirt had been pushed up, revealing a perfect spiral drawn on my skin in red dust. The exact pattern. From Thomas's door. My heart raced as I washed it off, but the image seemed to linger even after the dust was gone, like a shadow under my skin. The next morning, I found Thomas's truck parked outside the facility. But no Thomas. Inside the vehicle was his phone with a single text message drafted but never sent. Dr. Harlow, they're drawn to your bloodline. Get out before the alignment. They're already using you to come through. Another search through Mom's lab revealed a hidden room behind a filing cabinet. Inside were specimens in sealed containers, strange organic material that looked like neither plant nor animal. Labels identified them as boundary samples with dates and times. There was also a recorder with a single audio file. Mom's voice tired and frightened. Day 97. The entities continue to manifest during sleep cycles. They're getting stronger as the alignment approaches. The government team wants to continue, thinks they can control the manifestations for some kind of psychological warfare program. They don't understand these aren't separate entities. They're all connected, different faces of something vast, something that wants in. A pause then. I've convinced them to evacuate everyone but me. I've modified the petroglyph sequence to create a temporary seal, but it requires maintenance, a constant presence, a sacrifice. Her voice broke. Josie, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I hoped you'd never have to know. But our minds are compatible with the boundary space. It's why they want us specifically. I've bought us 3 years until the next alignment. If I've failed, it's up to you now. The recording ended. I sat in shock, finally understanding. My mother hadn't committed suicide. She'd sacrificed herself, somehow using her own consciousness to strengthen the barrier between worlds. And now, as the alignment approached again, it was weakening. The dream entities were pushing through, and somehow they were using me to do it. Outside, the sky darkened unnaturally as dust clouds gathered, swirling in patterns that mirrored the petroglyphs. I could feel something building like pressure before a storm. I had less than 3 days to figure out how to stop them. 3 days before the alignment would open the door completely. And somewhere in this facility was the answer. The method my mother had used, the sacrifice she had made. I just had to find it before they found me. I spent the next day in a frenzy, digging through every corner of Mom's research. The dust storm outside grew worse, cutting me off completely from the outside world. No cell signal, no way to leave. Just me and whatever was pushing through from the other side. Time was running out. I could feel it in my bones. I found more recordings hidden in various places. Mom had been careful to spread everything out, as if she knew someone might try to destroy her work. Each piece revealed another part of the puzzle. The petroglyphs. Are keys, she explained in one recording. Not just drawings, but actual locks binding the worlds together. The ancient people discovered that certain patterns could strengthen or weaken the boundaries between realities. In another file, she detailed the government's involvement. They'd funded her research, thinking they could use the dream entities as weapons, a way to invade enemy minds during sleep. They never understood the real danger. These aren't just dreams, Mom's voice explained. They're a different kind of reality bleeding into ours. The entities exist primarily in the collective unconscious, the shared dreamscape of all human minds. But during certain alignments, when the stars match patterns in the ancient rocks, the barriers thin. That's when they can push through completely. As night fell on the second day, I felt the change immediately. The air seemed to ripple like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Shadows moved oddly, not matching the objects casting them. I made a discovery in Mom's personal bathroom, a hidden compartment behind her mirror. Inside was a small notebook and a strange device that looked like a metal headband with wires and small crystals embedded in it. The notebook contained the final piece. The permanent solution requires a conscious human presence in both dimensions simultaneously. A mind that exists in both places can act as a seal, a human lock to replace the failing petroglyphs. But the price is high. The consciousness becomes trapped between, never fully in either world. My mother had sacrificed herself, somehow transferring her consciousness into the dream dimension to maintain the barrier. But it was failing now. 3 years later, as the new alignment approached. That night, I couldn't avoid sleep any longer. My body simply shut down after nearly 2 days awake. The dream came instantly, more vivid than ever. I stood in a vast red desert that stretched forever in all directions. The sky above was not our sky, but something else. Swirling patterns of light and darkness. Dozens of the entities moved across the landscape toward me, each wearing different animal aspects. Coyote, raven, snake, bear. "You understand now," said one with a voice like thunder. "Your mother tried to stop us, but she only delayed the inevitable." "Why here?" I asked. "Why this place specifically?" "This is a thin place," it replied. "A natural convergence where realities meet. Your ancestors knew this. They built their protections, drew their symbols. For thousands of years, they kept us out." Another entity stepped forward, this one wearing my mother's face like a mask over something inhuman. "Until humans forgot," it said with Mom's voice. "Until they stopped believing, started digging, building, disturbing the locks." I backed away from the horrible mimicry of my mother. "What happens if you come through completely?" "Change," they said in unison. "Your reality becomes malleable. Dreams and thoughts take physical form. The barriers between mind and matter dissolve." "That sounds like the end of the world," I whispered. "It is the end of your world," said the one wearing my mother's face. "And the beginning of something new." I woke gasping, my heart racing. The facility was vibrating slightly, objects shifting on tables. Outside, the dust storm had intensified, red particles swirling in complex, impossible patterns. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed to understand exactly how Mom had performed her sacrifice. I found her final video log hidden inside a petroglyph. Cast. She looked exhausted, her eyes sunken. "The device creates a bridge," she explained, holding up the metal headband I'd found. "It synchronizes brainwaves with the natural frequency of the boundary, but it requires blood, a physical connection. The ancient people knew this. Blood is the bridge between body and spirit, matter and energy," she demonstrated, pressing her finger to a small needle on the inside of the band, then placing it on her head. With the right sequence of petroglyphs activated in the correct order, a consciousness can transfer partially across the boundary, creating a human seal. I gathered everything I needed: the headband device, maps showing the correct petroglyph sequence, and Mom's notes on the ritual. As I worked, the facility's reality began to warp. Walls rippled. Doorways temporarily led to different rooms than they should have. Time felt slippery, minutes stretching and compressing unpredictably. Just before dawn on the third day, I heard a knock at the door. I froze, knowing no one could have reached the facility through the storm. The knocking came. Again, more insistent. When I didn't answer, a voice called out, Grace Tsosie's voice. "Let me in, child. There's not much time." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Grace stood there, somehow untouched by the raging dust storm around her. She walked in calmly. "You found your way to the truth," she said, "just as your mother did." "You knew all along," I said. "You're not just a local resident." Grace smiled sadly. "I am a guardian, one of many who have watched the thin places for generations. Your mother joined our ranks in her way. She's still out there, isn't she? In the dream world." Grace nodded, holding the barrier but growing weaker. "The alignment peaks tonight at midnight. We must be ready." Together, we prepared the ritual Mom had designed. Grace showed me how certain symbols in the facility's architecture mirrored the protective petroglyphs. My mother had incorporated ancient safeguards into the modern building. "Your mother discovered that connecting the petroglyphs in a specific sequence could strengthen the boundary," Grace explained as we worked. "But as the barrier weakened, it required a more powerful lock." "A human consciousness," I said quietly. "Yes, but not just any human. These entities are drawn to specific bloodlines, minds that naturally resonate with the boundary frequency. Your family has been connected to them for generations." As sunset approached, reality began breaking down more dramatically. Walls became transparent, showing glimpses of that other desert with its alien sky. Shadows moved independently of their casters. The air itself seemed to breathe. Grace and I activated the petroglyph sequence, painting connecting lines between them with a mixture of red clay and our own blood. The symbols began to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "There's something you should know," Grace said as we completed the circle. "Your mother isn't dead, not exactly. Her body died, but her consciousness exists in the boundary space." My hands shook. "Can she come back?" "No, but you can reach her. Speak to her one last time when you put on the device." Night fell, and with it came the full force of the incursion. Entities moved through walls, briefly visible, then vanishing. The air shimmered constantly now, reality itself unstable. At exactly 11:45 p.m., Grace nodded. "It's time." I sat in the center of our petroglyph circle and placed the metal headband on my brow. The small needle pricked my skin, and I felt a strange buzzing begin to fill my mind. "Remember," Grace said, her voice seeming to come from very far away, "find your mother. Complete the lock. Don't let them convince you to break it instead." The world dissolved around me, and I fell into darkness. I was falling through darkness that felt alive, like swimming through cold ink. Then suddenly I was standing in that vast red desert again, but everything was sharper now, more real than before. The entities circled me, keeping their distance, watching. The sky above swirled with impossible colors. Stars moved in patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. In the distance, rock formations floated above the ground, slowly turning. "You came willingly," said a voice behind me. I turned to find the entity wearing my mother's face. Up close, I could see how wrong it was. Mum's features stretched over something that wasn't human at all. "I'm not talking to you," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Where is my mother?" "The real one." The entity tilted its head at an impossible angle. "What makes you think she still exists?" "Because the barrier is still holding," I answered. "She's maintaining it." A slow smile spread across its face, too wide, showing too many teeth. "Clever girl, follow then." It led me across the desert landscape that seemed to shift and change with each step. We passed glowing petroglyphs that hovered in midair, spinning slowly. In the distance, I could see a shimmer in the air, like a heat haze, but vertical, stretching from ground to sky. The boundary, the entity explained, thinning by the minute. Soon we will pour through. We crested a hill, and in a small valley below, I saw her, my mother, sitting cross-legged on the ground. She looked just as I remembered her, but surrounded by a faint glow. Her eyes were closed, her hands resting on her knees. Around her, a complex pattern of light formed a barrier. "Mom!" I called, running down the slope. Her eyes opened slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. When she saw me, her face filled with horror. "Josie, no, you shouldn't be here." She tried to stand, but couldn't seem to move from her position. I knelt beside her. "I found your research. I know what you did." Tears filled her eyes. "I never wanted this for you. I thought the barrier would hold longer." "It's breaking down," I said. "The alignment is tonight." She nodded sadly. "I can feel it. I've been fighting them for so long, but I'm getting weaker." Behind us, entities gathered, watching. Their forms shifted constantly, human shapes blending with animal aspects. Some flowed like smoke, others seemed made of stone or shadow. "You need to go back," Mom said urgently. "Now before it's too late?" "Not without stopping them," I said. "Tell me how to fix the barrier." She looked at me with such sadness. "There's only one way. Someone must take my place." "Then I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "No." The force of her shout made the ground tremble. "You don't understand what it means. I'm trapped here, Josie. Not alive, not dead, just existing. Forever." "What choice do we have?" I asked quietly. "They're coming through." Mom took my hand, her touch warm despite everything. "There's another way. Together we might be strong enough to create a permanent seal." "How?" "The blood connection between us is powerful. If we combine our consciousness at the boundary itself, we could create something new, something stronger than either of us alone." The entities were moving closer now, sensing our plan. The air grew colder. "What would happen to us?" I asked. "We'd become part of the boundary itself, neither here nor there, conscious but different." She squeezed my hand. "It's still a sacrifice, Josie." "Like becoming guardians," I said, remembering Grace's words. Mom nodded. "The ancients called them the Watchers Between, humans who merged with the boundary to protect both worlds." The ground beneath us began to shake. In the distance, the shimmer in the air was growing, expanding. The alignment was reaching its peak. "They're breaking through," Mom said urgently. "We need to decide now." Around us, the entities were growing. More solid, more real. Some were already starting to look fully physical. "What do we do?" I asked. "Follow me to the boundary. Don't listen to them. Don't look at them. They'll try to distract you, trick you." She stood with effort. "Focus only on me and the task." We began walking toward the distant shimmer, hand in hand. The entities followed, their whispers filling my head. "You could join us," they said. "Experience everything, become anything. Why fight what's inevitable?" Images flashed through my mind. Power, knowledge, experiences beyond human understanding. For a moment, I felt myself wavering. "Josie," Mom's voice cut through the whispers. "Stay with me." I tightened my grip on her hand and kept walking. We neared the boundary. I could see it clearly. A vast tear in reality itself, edges frayed and pulsing. Through it, I caught glimpses of the research facility, Grace standing guard over my physical body. "We need to recreate the petroglyph sequence," Mom explained. "But with our minds, our shared consciousness," we stood before the tear, facing each other, still holding hands. The entities surrounded us now, a circle of shifting forms and hungry eyes. "Focus on the patterns," Mom said. "See them in your mind." I closed my eyes and visualized the petroglyphs, the spirals, the animal forms, the connecting lines. In my mind, I drew them with light, feeling each symbol resonate with something deep inside me. Mom's consciousness joined with mine, guiding me, showing me the correct sequence. Together, we built a pattern of thought and memory and blood connection that stretched across the boundary. The entities realized what we were doing. They rushed forward, trying to break our concentration, tear us apart. Cold hands gripped my shoulders, my face. Voices screamed in my ears. "Don't break the connection," Mom shouted over the chaos. I held onto her hands so tightly my knuckles went white. The patterns in my mind blazed brighter, connecting with hers, forming a web across the boundary. "Now," Mom whispered, "the final seal requires both of us. Are you ready?" I looked into her eyes one last time. Yes. Together we pushed, our consciousness into the boundary itself. Pain shot through me, not physical pain, but something deeper, like my very self was being stretched and reshaped. I could feel Mom's mind merging with mine, our memories flowing together. The boundary absorbed us, used us as material to repair itself. Around us, the entities shrieked in rage as the tear began to close. They clawed at the edges, tried to force their way through, but the new barrier held firm. I felt myself spreading thin, becoming something else. My awareness expanded until I could feel the entire boundary, miles of it, wrapped around the thin place where the worlds touched. "Mom," I called, suddenly afraid I'd lost her. "I'm here." Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We're here." Together, the boundary sealed completely with a sound like thunder. The entities retreated, howling in defeat. In the distance, I could see Grace kneeling beside my physical body, removing the headband device. My last human thought was a mixture of sadness and peace. I would never return to my life, but I wasn't gone. I had become something new, something necessary. As my consciousness settled into its new form, I felt others like us, ancient guardians who had made the same choice through the centuries. We were the watchers, the protectors of the boundary, and we would never let it break again. In the physical world, Grace stood up slowly. She looked around the room at the empty metal headband, at my body, still breathing but empty of the consciousness that had been Josie Harlow. "It's done," she whispered to the empty room. "They've become guardians." Outside, the dust storm suddenly calmed. The air cleared, and the stars shone brightly over the red rocks. The alignment passed, and the worlds remained separate. But if you looked carefully at the shadows on the facility walls, you might see them move strangely sometimes. And in the ancient petroglyphs, two new figures had appeared, standing side by side, hands joined, watching over the thin places where dreams and reality meet. 3 years later, a dusty SUV pulled up to the abandoned research facility. 2 men and a woman climbed out, shielding their eyes from the bright Arizona sun. "Are you sure this is the place?" asked the younger man, looking doubtfully at the weathered buildings. "Positive," the woman replied, checking her clipboard. "Government property, abandoned 6 years ago, the Harlow Research Station." The older man, gray-haired and serious, led the way to the main entrance. According to the files, there were 2 incidents here, one in 2021, when the original team evacuated, then another in 2024, when Dr. Josephine Harlow disappeared. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through dirty windows. Everything was exactly as Josie had left it, papers scattered across. Desks, equipment set up for experiments never completed. "What exactly happened to her?" the younger man asked, running his finger through the dust on a desk. "Nobody knows for certain," the woman answered. "The local woman who was with her, Grace Sosi, said Dr. Harlow suffered some kind of stroke or seizure during her research. By the time medical help arrived, she was in a vegetative state. She's still alive, technically, in a care facility in Phoenix." The older man wandered toward the back of the building. "And nobody's been here since." "No one official," the woman said. "The locals avoid it, say it's haunted." The younger man laughed nervously. Superstitious nonsense. They split up, exploring different sections of the facility. The older man found himself in what had been Josie's mother's office. Something about the room made the hair on his arm stand up. It felt watched. In the corner of his eye, he thought he saw movement, a shadow shifting where no shadow should be. When he turned, nothing was there. "Found something?" The woman called from another room. They gathered around a desk where she'd discovered a journal, Josie's final notes. "Listen to this," she read aloud. "The boundary requires guardians, always has. The ancient people understood this. Some things shouldn't cross over. Some doors need to stay closed." The younger man frowned. What does that even mean? As they discussed the cryptic message, none of them noticed the subtle movement of dust on the floor, forming a perfect spiral pattern behind them. The older man shivered suddenly. "Let's gather what we need and go. Something about this place feels wrong." As they packed up documents and equipment, the woman paused by a window, looking out at the red rock formations. "Beautiful but creepy," she murmured. For just a moment, in the reflection of the glass, she thought she saw someone standing behind her. A woman with kind eyes and a sad smile. When she spun around, the room was empty. That night, as they drove away, the younger man glanced in the rear-view mirror. "Did you see that?" "See what?" asked the woman from the back seat. "I thought I saw two people standing by the main building, watching us leave." The older man looked back, but the facility was already lost to view, swallowed by the darkness of the desert night. "Just your imagination," he said firmly. "There's nobody out here for miles." But as they disappeared into the night, two conscious minds that had once been Josie and her mother watched silently from their place in the boundary. They would watch over this thin place between worlds, as they had for 3 years now, as they would for many years to come. The research team would return to their superiors with documents and theories, but never the full truth. Because some truths can only be found in that space between sleeping and waking, where dreams and reality blur. And in that space, the Guardians would be waiting.